Do you know how big an 8 by 8 room is? Since I wear size 10.5 shoes, I can walk across it in just over 9 steps, and I've been doing that a lot lately. You see, for the past 4 months, I have too much free time on my hands, and since I don't have my laptop with me right now, I've been trying to find something to do. I'm either rereading in my mind the periodic table or the formulas I was working on earlier. Sometimes I lie in bed, listening to the sounds around me and trying to identify them to distract myself. I keep telling myself that everything I did was in the best interest of my daughter. I know it was, but now I wonder if I had ulterior motives for doing what I did. I'm not sure of anything else, but that's the story I'm going to stick to, at least until I get out of here. Good morning, Mr. Moore. How are you feeling today? My attorney, Victoria Howe, asked as I was led over to a long, shiny wooden table and my handcuffs were removed. Pretty good. I've dropped another 2 pounds. I think I'll be at my ideal weight again by Christmas. Did you know I can do 100 push-ups without stopping? Our conversation broke off. All rise, the Fifth Circuit Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Thomas presiding, the bailiff announced to everyone in the courtroom. The judge took her seat and adjusted her reading glasses before looking in our direction. Miss Howe, are you and your client ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Victoria replied. Very good, then please proceed. Victoria, or Vicky as I like to call her, attempted to present another batch of motions. The judge listened to her for what seemed like 10 minutes, not even allowing her to take a breath. Vicky argued that since I had been granted full custody of my daughter Linda, what I was being subjected to was nothing short of cruel and inhumane punishment. Miss Howe, is your client willing to tell the court the whereabouts of his daughter and allow his ex-wife to visit her? Those are the only issues before us today. The court is not challenging his right to custody. However, his ex-wife's rights to visit his daughter are not being honored, and have not been honored for the past 7 months. A condition of his release, as previously stated, is that he must provide the court with information about his daughter's whereabouts. He must also grant his ex-wife court-ordered visitation rights. It goes on to say that his ex-wife is willing to consider court-supervised visitation if she is allowed to see her daughter again. I looked at Victoria and shook my head. Your Honor, Mr. Moore is refusing to provide his daughter's whereabouts at this time. In addition, we would like to file a motion that he be allowed access to a laptop computer so that he can keep up to date on the day-to-day affairs of his company. Contempt, disgust, no, more like anger streamed down the judge's face. It was as if she was saying to herself, "How dare you disobey my order?" Motion denied, Judge Vicky said loudly. Mr. Stephen Moore is to remain in custody in the county jail until he reports the whereabouts of his daughter Linda Moore. The judge then banged her gavel and said, "Next case." Before the bailiff could walk over to return me to my cell, Vicky whispered, "She's got a crush on you, you know that, don't you? She's going to keep you locked up until you tell her where Linda is." I could tell that Vicky, like the judge, was becoming more and more frustrated with me. "Vicky, just do whatever it takes to get me out of here. I don't care what or how." "Steve, tell them." "I can't do that, and you know why. Just go back to your office and do what I'm paying you a lot of money to do. Also, have Carl stop by tomorrow and let me know how things are going at my company," I said, looking at a glum Vicky. "Steve, I'm out of options now." "Vicky, I have faith in you that I will get out of here and celebrate Christmas with my family again. So whatever it takes, get me out of here." I was handcuffed again and escorted back to my cell. That's how my last 3 court hearings went. Vicky was right. The judge was partial to me. She had a reputation for being a hard ass. She wouldn't let anyone mess around with her in the courtroom, no matter how much money they had. And I had a lot. The next day, Carl came by to see me and tell me how my company was doing without me. "Carl, I wish you would smile once in a while. It would lift my spirits for goodness sake," I said with a smirk. "Steve, how can I smile when a bunch of business isn't getting done because you're rotting in this place? Tell them what the hell they want to know so we can get back to running your company." I glared at him. "Okay, I tried. Let's get down to business." For the next hour, he filled me in on how things were going. I trusted this guy with my life, and he never disappointed me. We were still making money, but the negative publicity in the newspapers was getting in the way of our new business. Carl, these idiots do it to look good in the eyes of the media and their shareholders. You and I both know they can't get our products anywhere else in the state, so eventually they'll have to deal with me. However, there are two companies that I want to make pay dearly when they come back. They have lied to me in the press and are going to pay tenfold for every word printed. By the way, how is our other project coming along? I asked, knowing full well that my conversations are always recorded. It's progressing, but slowly and expensively. Carl, I said, looking him straight in the eye, I don't care how much money or people you throw at it. I want it done and done quickly. Do you understand? Yes, boss. I just wanted you to be aware of the expense. I believe my company will be in good shape when I leave, and don't worry, you will be rewarded. One more note, find another group of lawyers to help Victoria Howe. The judge seems to have a personal vendetta against me. Try to get her removed from my case. You know that if that doesn't work, you'll only make her even angrier, don't you? And what are you saying? What's she going to do? Throw me in jail? I hummed. Also, check her background. There should be something in there we can use, I told him, getting up since our hour was up. Take care of my baby, okay? I turned and walked back to my cell. That night, I counted the cracks in the ceiling, and after recounting them 5 times, I came to one more. 21. I'll have to complain to the judge about my apartments, I joked to myself before lying back on the bed. The divorce was nasty, if for no other reason than the fact that I thought it would never happen to us. Thank goodness my father had talked me into drawing up an ironclad prenup, or it could have been much worse. I was just getting established in the industry, and my eyes were blinded by my love for Shalia. I didn't see any need for it at the time. Hell, we were going to love each other forever, but it seems like forever only lasts 8.5 years. Luckily, she agreed to sign it. I guess she thought eternity was forever too, although it wasn't. Like I said, I'm rich, but most of all I'm smart and maybe a little arrogant. I probably could have stayed out of school altogether, but my mom said I needed to get a proper upbringing. That included the school experience, although I was bored most of the time. However, she did allow me to take college courses online, as long as it didn't interfere with my normal life. I graduated from college and earned my bachelor's degree by the time I was a senior in high school. My mom also made sure I went on dates at least twice a month. Most of the girls I dated were dumb as rocks compared to me, and I easily grew tired of their silly teenage looks and games. At 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 165 pounds, I wasn't a jock and had the physique to prove it, but I didn't wear arcane glasses or use pocket protection. I was pretty average looking. You know, girls would say to each other about guys like me, well, he's got a great personality. My parents weren't rich, and I drove their used car. I guess you could joke that I was a good catch for a prom queen. Yeah, sure. Mom, I really don't want to go tonight, I told her over and over as she drove me to one social event after another. Honey, do this for me, okay? Find a pretty girl, talk to her, and even ask her to dance. Young man, you may be smart, but you also need to know how to interact with other people. You can't learn social manners from a book. You have to live it through experience, she always reminded me with a smile on her face. Now go and have a nice time. My mom never took no for an answer. She was going to make a social butterfly out of me, one way or another. And me? I'd rather blend in with my surroundings and live my own life, as inconspicuous as possible. However, that wasn't so easy after someone gave me the nickname Brain, and it stuck with me. Kids can be so cruel sometimes. Graduating high school set me free. I got a full scholarship to our state university, and after that, I could do whatever I wanted. I had a double major in chemistry and biology as well as math. In college, I got a grant to research food enzymes, and that's how I met Shalia. She was studying to be a lab technician. 5'6" tall, with light brown wavy hair, brilliant blue eyes, and a beautiful body. She was both smart and pretty in her own way. I may have been the consummate academic, but I could also appreciate a pretty girl when I saw one. I spent most of my time in the lab, and when she came to class, I was always there for her. Every now and then, she would get stuck on some task and ask me a question or two. I was always happy to help her. What started out as just a question turned into full-blown discussions about what I was working on. While Shalia could grasp the concept of what I was trying to do, the principles of how I was doing it usually eluded her. When I took her out to dinner, we shared pizza and a pitcher of soda, and I began to like her much more than just a lab partner. Alas, to my dismay, she told me that studying came first for her, and that while we could date, she wasn't looking for a relationship right now. So we remained just good friends and met from time to time as she allowed. A double doctorate in chemistry and biology and a master's degree in business completed my short-lived college years. I had learned all I could and was now applying for government research grants on my own. With their help, I got two and set up store in a small building. I took out loans, and my parents even mortgaged their house to help me finance a new lab and equipment. When I started working 14 to 16 hours a day, my mom quit her job to help me with the endless government paperwork. This allowed me to focus solely on my work. When I made my first breakthrough, it was especially wonderful because the grants were over and the results and future profits belonged solely to me. When I made my second and third breakthroughs, my father quit his job and became the manager of my business. Life was stressful, but good. The one thing I never realized was that when you want to hire a good person, you don't have to look for them. You just have to give them a reason, and they will find you on their own. I felt I needed two top-notch people to help me in my work. I looked for the best in the field. I wasn't making a lot of money, but with the right people, I felt I could become one in a couple years, especially after I found out that my 4 patents would probably be approved next year. I interviewed probably 20 people who thought they were good, but by the time I was done with them, they left with their tails tucked. Katie was recommended to me by an old high school friend of mine. She was very shy and almost never made eye contact with me, but she was very bright. Kathy, tell me about yourself. What is your home life like? I asked. She looked at me and said she lives with her parents and younger brother. She doesn't have a boyfriend, which didn't surprise me, but she needs a job now that she's out of high school. Her grades were excellent, and even though I couldn't pay a hell of a lot, I offered her a job. Katie, I can offer you $2,000 a month to start. You will be paid a salary, not work by the hour. I expect you to do your job because I won't have time to babysit you. If you do what I ask, you will grow with the company, and so will your paycheck. Mr. Moore, will there be a certain dress code here? She asked, blushing slightly. Kathy, I don't care. The important thing is that you do your job. My answer made her blush even more. She agreed, and I needed another employee. Carl worked for a large pharmaceutical company. He was making a huge salary, but because of office politics, he was denied a promotion. He was more than angry. He was what I was looking for, but we were far apart in what I could afford to pay him and what he thought he was worth. When he got an offer from another company, we met again. He threw the offer on my desk to show me that he wasn't fooling me about the amount. Carl, if I were you, I would take that offer and run with it. However, in 3 years, when I'm doing great and this amount is chump change, I hope you'll feel the same way, I said as I handed him the papers back. But if you accept my last offer, I will give you 1% of the stock in my company next year, and every year after that up to 5%. So you can take the money that's on the table now, or work hard and have a real future in the future. The choice is yours. It took 2 days, but he accepted my offer and I was ready. We were growing fast, and I needed extra help both in the lab and in the office. One day, while out to get lunch for everyone at the nearest subway, I ran into Shalia. She was standing in line, about 4 people ahead of me. I hadn't seen her since she was in her last year of college. As she passed me with her order, she stopped to talk and we ended up having lunch together. She worked in a small lab 2 miles away and didn't make much money. Shelia decided she needed experience before asking for what she thought she was worth. What are you focused on in terms of money? I asked. Right now I make $1,500 a month with no benefits. I figure I'm worth at least $2,000 in full health insurance, she told me without blinking an eye. Can you type? What do you mean, can I type? It's a simple question. Can you type more than just poking at a keyboard? Not all of it, she replied, not realizing where this conversation was going. Well, if you can type and you don't have any trouble keeping file cabinets and doing various lab work, I'd like to offer you a job. Steve, who do you work for? Myself. I have my own lab on Canal Street. Right now, I have 2 employees and my parents working for me, and we could all use a little help. Here, I said, holding out my business card to her. Think about it. Come by sometime after work and I'll give you a tour. I'd love to talk some more, but I'm having lunch here and they won't be happy I'm so late. Think about it, Shelia, I suggested again. Where have you been? I'm starving, Carl asked Carl. Met an old friend and offered her a job, I said, handing over the food. Her? Someone I should know about? He pronounced with a goofy grin. Just a girl I dated a few times in college, that's all. And what would her duties be, pray tell? Carl, you really are an asshole, I waved him off, tossing him a can of Coke. Just asking, boss, but you don't have to tell me if it's too personal. Everyone laughed except Mom. Shelia came in on Thursday after work. She knocked on the door, and when no one answered at the front door, she tried the door, found it unlocked, and walked in. Anyone there? She shouted as she walked through the door into the lab. Dad and I were the last ones in there, so I stood up to greet her. Shelia, I'm glad you could make it, I said as I approached her. Shelia, this is my father Ken, I introduced them to each other. My father held out his hand. Dad, Shelia and I went to high school together, I explained. So this is the woman you offered the position to? He asked, sizing her up. Shelia, let me give you a tour of my baby. For the next 2 hours, I told her in detail about where we were now and where I estimated we would be in the next couple years. We just signed 3 new contracts and are expanding to a larger facility. My dad has secured the funding, and by Christmas we'll be twice the size we are now. Sheila, I think you would be a good addition to our group, and I can match the salary you are looking for. Don't you want to look at my resume before you offer me a job? You're forgetting that we already worked together in college. Steve, you worked and I went to school. Well, I know you're smart, hardworking, and partial to new ideas. With those qualities, you'll be a great addition to our staff. Well, in that case, I accept your offer. It's true that I need to give my current employer a week's notice, but I can start right after that. We shook hands. Father looked on without saying a word. I expect you on the 15th early in the morning. Wear what you're comfortable in. We have a free Friday every day of the week here. You don't have to worry about lunch. One of the perks is we provide lunch and dinner if you have to stay late. 10 minutes later, she was gone, and Dad and I finished the job. You like her, don't you? Dad, she's just a girl I've dated a couple times, that's all. Steve, remember you're talking to me, he replied without a shadow of a smile. We have a rough 6 months ahead of us, and I need you to keep your head down until we move and get settled in. Dad, you worry too much. Son, this is my job. Shalia started working, and it was better than I expected. She grasped everything quickly and turned into an asset almost overnight. Everyone was happy for me except my father. He had been watching my feelings for Shalia grow, and while receptive, he was also cautious. Why doesn't Dad like Shalia? I asked Mom one evening. Steve, he likes Shalia, but he thinks you have too much on your plate right now for romance. Mom, Dad proposed to you on your 3rd date, and you were married 2 weeks later. And he thinks I'm in too much of a hurry? She laughed. You know your dad. He'll take care of you until the day he dies, but I'll talk to him. Shelia and I met when we had time, and when we didn't, we improvised. One Saturday night, about 3 months later, she asked the question of all questions. Steve, I'm your girlfriend, aren't I? Well, if you're not, I don't know what we've been doing for the last 7 hours. No, silly. I mean, we're together, right? I sat up, leaning my back against the headboard of the bed, and took my glass of wine from the table. Okay, what's up? I asked, taking a sip and handing it to her. I just want to know that we're hitting the road together, that's all. In other words, you want to make sure I'm not just using you, I said with a laugh, reaching for her. Asshole, she replied, hitting me with a pillow. Do I owe you an explanation? I'm falling in love with you and I know you like me, but I'm not sure how much. There, I've said it all, she continued. She finished her wine and stared at me with a concerned look. So? Does that mean I have to give up all the other hotties I've been having fun with every night? I joked. But when she didn't smile, I realized she was being serious. Look, babe, I care about you a lot, and I think you know that. It's love, I guess. Yeah, but give me some time, okay? We'll have a nice break after the move, and we can explore all our avenues and possibilities. Steve, I think we've explored all my options except one, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. I just need to know I'm not being played, that's all. Shelia, there are two things I don't do. I don't lie and I don't play games with those I care about, I said. Now that we've got that sorted out, what's one way I haven't checked it out yet? After that, we became an official couple and everyone knew and accepted it, even my father. The next few months were brutal. Things were going well, and combined with the move, we had very little time for each other. By December 15th, we moved into our building, and by the 22nd, we had everything up and running just in time for Christmas. We closed the facility between Christmas and New Year's, and everyone went on vacation. We spent Christmas Eve at her parents' house and Christmas Day at mine. By the evening of the 25th, we were exhausted. Since we were both still living with our parents, we spent more and more time together at the Hampton Inn. Steve, she said quietly, I need something from you. Steve, look at me, okay? I want us to have our own apartment. That made me stop and look at her for real. I'm serious. I think it's time we got our own place. Steve, I'm 23 and you're 27. Don't you think it's time for us to live on our own? For the money we're spending on hotel rooms, it would probably pay for itself. She added with doubt in her voice. That is, only if you want to. I realized that this question was bound to come up sooner or later, and I had already given it a lot of thought. After the move, things would go back to normal, whatever that was. I really liked the idea of having our own place. Okay, when do you want to do that? I think that question caught her off guard. I think she had prepared herself for an argument, and now she just sat there looking at me until her brain finally got to what I had just said. Oh my God, this is going to be so great. We'll have our own apartment and we won't even have to wear clothes if we don't want to. She was bouncing on the bed. When she stopped and took a serious look on her face, I got a little worried. How do you think your parents will take this news, especially your father? Let me worry about that. It'll be your job to find us a suitable place near work that meets all our needs. I don't need a huge apartment, a spacious kitchen, and this will suffice. It took about 3 weeks, but we did find the right place and moved in together. My parents wanted to know what my intentions were, but I told them I wanted to get to know Shelia better. I think you know her well enough, Mom said, winking at me, judging by all the bills from the Hampton Inn I've paid over the past few months. Dad didn't say a word, but he knew he couldn't control me anymore. Life was good. Over the next 2 years, my business grew rapidly, and we expanded once more until we finally moved to another, larger location. At Christmas that year, I proposed to Shelia, and she accepted. My father insisted on a prenuptial agreement, and although I objected, Shelia would not sign it. I made 2 changes to it so it wouldn't be so rigid, but in the end, we all got what we wanted. 3 months later, Shelia got pregnant, and Mom was beyond happy. When Linda was born, Shelia quit her job and stayed home to care for her. She was beautiful and looked a lot like her mom. She had the same light brown hair, blue eyes, and a small mole on her right ankle. Mom and Shelia became friendly as thieves while Dad and I ran the company. The next 5 years were successful for us. My business nearly quadrupled in size and my staff grew from 4 to 14. I was still usually swamped with work, but Shelia required me to attend dinner at least 3 nights a week. We bought a nice house, more than we needed, and when she had some free time, Shelia took up charity work and fundraising for the Children's Wish Foundation. Kids, not another event this weekend, I whined. I thought the three of us would sneak out and have a little fun, I said as I put my arm around her waist and kissed her. If you cancel the event, I'll make sure you won't regret it, I said pleadingly. Honey, you know that Saturday's auction is very important to me, and it's for a good cause, she replied, kissing me. These kids can't escape for the weekend, but if we raise enough money, we can at least make some of them smile. She had a good heart, and although I didn't like it, she was right. So, Saturday night we all went. I told my parents that if I had to go, they should go too. They didn't care, except Dad said he wouldn't dance no matter what Mom said. It was a pretty pleasant evening until I met Ken and his wife Connie. He was working with Shelia to organize the event, and I already knew that he owned a successful airplane parts company just outside of town. Their biggest customer was the US government, and with 2 wars going on, things were going well. Steve, this is Ken and Connie Collins, my wife introduced us. Ken has been a tremendous help in acquiring the items we will be auctioning off today. It's not a big deal. I just visited a few places and shamed them into giving twice as much as they had planned, and got the rest of us to donate money to the cause. Ken, don't be so modest. Because of what you did, we'll be able to send over 100 kids to various camps this summer. You should be proud of yourself. Well, if it hadn't been for Connie, I never would have been able to do it. She's been running the company while I've been gallivanting around raising funds. Looking at his wife and smiling, he said, I don't know what I would have done without her. The smile she answered him with was pleasant, but forced. It was the fake smile one gives a man when they are angry and don't want him to know it. Ken, I see a few people over there I want you to meet. Maybe you can talk them into giving a few extra dollars. It was nice meeting you two, Connie said as she pulled away from her husband. The only thing I knew about him was that he had money and let everyone know it. I think pompous and arrogant would be good words to describe Ken. But I knew Connie very well. She came from an old state and was tough as nails. She was an excellent negotiator and a worthy adversary to her competitors. She was more than qualified to run the business while her husband did the fundraising and entertained. But she didn't seem too happy about it. Now that's someone I wouldn't want to cross paths with, I thought to myself. The dinner was delicious, and the speeches as usual long. Everyone was thanked for their help, especially Ken and Shelia. After dinner, the music came on and my father cringed. My mom talked him into dancing, and I took great pleasure in enclosing my favorite wife in a hug. I wasn't upset when Ken asked Shelia to dance. Although there was nothing funny on the dance floor, I was embarrassed by the way he held her, talked to her, and laughed with her as they moved to the music. This was the only dance Ken would get with my wife that evening. When the auction began, everyone got involved, with one item or another selling for twice the price, knowing it was going to a good cause. When it came to the big lots, the bids didn't come in as freely. We all knew money was tight everywhere. I bought 2 mid-priced items, and that was all I was going to do until Shelia asked if I would bid on a weekend trip to wine country. Please, honey, do it for me, okay? How could I refuse? The bidding was going at breakneck speed, and it looked like Ken wanted it badly for some reason. When I made the last bid, Ken immediately bid $1,000 higher, and since there were no other bidders, he won. When he went over to claim his prize, he said he did it to take his wife there for her birthday. Everyone clapped and admired such a nice gesture, but his wife did not. She just sat there sipping wine from her glass. There seems to be trouble in paradise, I said to myself. Steve, we should have won this trip, Shelia pouted. Han, for the money he paid for it, we could have gone for a week instead of 3 days. Steve, he did it for his wife. What a romantic gesture. If you want romance, just wait until I bring you home, my love. That's not romantic. Okay, I'll buy you flowers on the way home. How about it? She just looked at me in a way that wasn't enough. And that's how it started. They say a cockroach can fit through a 1/64th inch gap just by squeezing in. For me, Ken was exactly that, and now I wished I had stepped on him when I had the chance. However, life went on. I worked, Sheila was still doing charity work, and the three of us were one big happy family until May 21st. It was getting late, and I was mulling over some papers when I glanced at my watch. 7 o'clock, and it was time for me to leave. I turned off the light and walked down the hall to Mom's office. She was sitting with her head resting on her desk. I don't pay my employees to sleep on the job, even if they did give birth to me, I said with a loud laugh. But she didn't budge. Mom, wake up. Dad is going to kick my ass if I don't get you out of here. I walked over to her and put my hand on her shoulder. It was cold, stone cold. When they finally arrived, the paramedics couldn't revive her. She was gone. They said it looked like a heart attack, but they couldn't be sure until they did all the tests. For the next 24 hours, everything happened in slow motion. I heard voices, but they were somewhere far away, and I just didn't pay attention to them. There must have been a lot of tears, people telling me how sorry they were, but nothing could be heard. It was my mom, the one staple that was always in my life. Steve, honey, is there anything I can help you with? Honey? My wife asked more than once, but there was really nothing anyone could do except bring my mom back. My daughter was crying and I held her until she stopped. And then I started, but my crying never stopped, at least not inside. A part of me died that day, and I didn't realize how big a part until months later. Carl and the other managers backed up Dad and me. Dad knew Mom was sick, but they both agreed not to say a word to anyone, including me. All the arrangements had been made in advance, so nothing had to be done. I didn't eat or drink and occasionally forced myself to breathe. I don't remember much about the funeral. I know that physically I was there, but only physically. There were a lot of people at the funeral, and I was told there was a lovely article written about her in the paper, but I never read it. Mom wasn't there and she didn't take me with her this time. My dad was always the one who kept me in line, but my mom did the rest. She filled my emotional needs as a child and taught me how to be the person I became. In her eyes, I saw the world as something to conquer, and when Linda was born, we became even closer, if that's even possible. When she died, I was lost. I felt empty inside. I think I died for a while too. Dad and Shalia gave me the help I needed. With counseling and lots of medication, I began to return to the ranks of the living, but it took almost 5 months. I was functioning at work, and if you didn't know any better, you'd swear I was fine, until I left the privacy of my lab. I think it was especially hard on Shalia and Linda. They couldn't get through to me, and though they tried, I never responded. Life went on without me. Carl was a godsend, and one day I called him and told him so. He asked if there was anything else he could do for me, and I told him he had done more than I could ever ask for. The week after the funeral, my father went to work with renewed vigor. More than once, Carl had to tell him to go home or he would physically remove him from the office. As the two of them grew the business, I tried to come to terms with the fact that Mom was no longer with us. It was a little over 6 months after the funeral when I first realized something was wrong. Steve, I'm off to a fundraiser tonight. Should be back before midnight, Shalia said as she got dressed. Don't you want me to come with you? I asked. I don't need a zombie for a date. Take your meds, and I'll see you when I get back. That was cruel, I thought. Do you want me to at least drive you? That won't be necessary. Ken will pick me up, she said, putting on her earrings. I think my look said it all. What? What is that look you're throwing at me? This is a fundraiser, not a date. With those words, I walked over to my medicine bottles, opened them, and poured the contents down the toilet. Steve, what are you doing? Something that should have been done months ago. Give me 20 minutes to get dressed. And you call Mr. Ken and tell him I'll be accompanying my own wife to dinner. I looked at her, and she realized she had better not say anything right now. A large crowd had gathered, and everyone was still expressing condolences for my loss. I thanked them, but immediately changed the subject. Seeing the cockroach, I prepared my heel. Steve, you look good. How are you doing? Never better, Ken, I said aloud, inwardly frowning in disgust. I guess he understood anyway, because he apologized and stepped back. That wasn't very friendly, Shalia whispered to me. I have no reason to be friendly with him, was all I said. After dinner, when the music started up, I asked Shalia if she wanted to dance. Do you mind? She asked. I'm not dead yet, I replied, smiling. And we danced for the next half hour. It felt good to hold her in my arms again, and then it happened. Hey, old man, can I dance with your beautiful wife? Asked Ken, already reaching for her. No. I guessed from the surprised look on his face that he wasn't used to being turned down. It took Shalia by surprise, too. Steve, it's just one dance, Shalia pleaded, looking at me. What do you mean, no? Don't you understand? Okay, let me repeat it slower so you understand what I'm saying. No, you will not dance with my wife now or ever again. Now, do you understand, or do I need to write this down for you? I said, looking him straight in the eye. No problem, he said, and fled. Steve, that was rude. Shalia, did you want to dance with him and not me? Of course not. Why would you ask that? Because you looked at me like that when I basically told him to go to hell, that's all. After that night, my mind started imagining a lot of things. Did we make love that night when we got home? No. She complained that she had a bit of a headache. The next morning, I left long before Shalia woke up. I came in first. Good morning, boss, Carl said as he came into the room and dropped his stuff and started making coffee. You look good. How are you feeling? Like I could chew the ass out of a dead dog, so please don't mess with me this morning, I growled at him without a smile. Well, it looks like the old Steve is back with us. Maybe we can catch up. For the next 2 days, I didn't come home. I slept in my office, showered, and since I had a couple changes of clothes, all I needed was some food. I had already unplugged my cell phone, unplugged my work phone, and told everyone to leave me alone. I checked and rechecked the test results from the last few months and found that too many things had fallen through the cracks. I called a meeting. Listen, guys, if you still want to work here on Monday, I strongly suggest you get your heads out of your asses and do your jobs, or I will find someone else to do them. This is my only warning. Next time I'll be cutting your severance pay. Do I make myself clear? There were many nods, a few startled looks, and a few pissed off people, but everyone got the point. When Shalia arrived just before 5, Carl warned her not to come into my office. I don't know what the hell happened between you two, but I wouldn't go in there if I were you. It doesn't scare me, she replied. So, is this your funeral? He turned away. When she walked in, I didn't look up. I knew who it was, but I wasn't going to play her games today. Steve, she said once, and then said it louder the second time. Steve! I looked up, and my eyes said it all. Are you coming home for dinner tonight? She asked. That's a good question. Make up your mind about the house. What are you talking about? It's a simple question, Shalia. Define what home is and why the hell should I go there? Okay, I'll play your stupid games. Home is where we all live and where you have to come eat and sleep every night, she replied wryly. You see, that's my point of view. That's where I lived with my loving family. It was my fortress of solitude where I could be myself, play with my beautiful daughter, and make love to my wife. Now I'm going to ask you again. Why do you want me to go to a place where I know I'm not welcome? Steve, you haven't been there in months. When your mom died, you left us, and for a while I didn't think you were coming back. She died and you didn't, or you weren't supposed to. It may have been hard for you, but how do you think we all felt, knowing there was nothing we could do? I don't know how often I reached for you in bed, hoping that just once you would take me in your arms. I wanted so badly to make things better for you by chasing away all your demons, but you never let me in. I tried, God knows I tried, but I finally gave up and decided to wait for you to come back or die. One of the two had to happen eventually. So when did you and your buddy Ken start dating? We're not a couple, he's a good friend. He was someone to talk to, someone to confide in when you weren't around. A friend with benefits? I haven't made love to anyone since the last time we did it. What we did back when you were a walking zombie was nothing more than masturbation, just using each other's bodies. But I'm not going to wait for you forever anymore. Unless you decide you want to continue our marriage, I want out. At this point, not only was she screaming, but tears were streaming down her face. Okay, then you have to make me one and only one promise before I make that decision, I told her. Anything. Don't rush to answer, Shalia. Before I ask, you might not fulfill it. Steve, I said anything, and I mean it. Good. I don't ever want you to talk to or see Ken again. You can't be serious, that's stupid. I'm not going to compete with Ken for my own wife. You have to make a choice. It's either him or me. You can't have us both. And since I'm such a nice guy, I'll let you think about it until I get home tonight. Then you can either call and tell him you won't talk to him anymore, or you can come see him later. I don't know what his wife will say to that, but that's for the three of you to decide. She looked at me, said something under her breath, and left, slamming the door. Well, at least I'll know if I have a wife in about 2 hours, I said sadly to myself as I sat back down at my desk. For the next 2 hours, I did nothing, just sat there, oblivious to everything around me. The drive home was short, too short, and when I pulled up to the dark house, at least I had an answer. With slumped shoulders, I walked to the door, wondering what she had written in her note, and if she had even bothered to leave it at all. I unlocked the door, walked in, and threw my laptop on the couch. I felt like my mother had died anew, and I was falling headfirst back into that dark cave. Never again, I told myself. My house had never been so empty, I thought. Life was good again. The next day, with a smile on my face, I brought everyone breakfast and slipped into my office. I spent the next half hour staring out the window. I was living my life again. After my mother died, my father tried to live at the factory, but eventually I made him take a leave of absence. I sent him on a 2-week cruise, and he came back with a smile on his face and bouncing around. I guess he was lucky. When he went to halftime, I was a little concerned, but when he applied to me 3 months later, I was more than happy for him. Dad had paid his dues and deserved a long retirement. He still helped me with advice when needed, but Carl took his place and worked just as hard as Dad did. I, on the other hand, worked hard, but made sure I didn't overdo it. Shortly before our 8-year anniversary, there was an accident in the lab, and one of our new employees got hurt. He wasn't hurt badly, but enough that OSHA swooped in with both feet. By the time they were done, I felt like I'd been subjected to a full body search by a nurse with freaking big hands. In all of this shit, I had somehow missed our anniversary, and by the time I remembered, the damage had already been done. Sheila had planned for the two of us to go away, but because of the OSHA inspection, I just couldn't leave at that time. You love this business more than you love me. I'll never be able to compete with this damn lab, she yelled at me. Hey, honey, we can go wherever you want to go as soon as they leave, which should be very soon. But she didn't want to hear it. We were still close, but at the same time, there was a lingering feeling that all was not well between us. We seemed like a happy couple, but something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. In the last couple years, Shalia was no longer as active as she used to be, working with the Children's Wish Foundation. However, after her accident in the lab, she got back into action. We talked about giving our daughter a sibling, but now she has rejected the idea. We're not getting any younger, and if we're going to do it, we should think about it as soon as possible, I told her. Steve, I'm not sure I want to go through all that again at my age. Linda is at an age where she has it easy, and I like my freedom. Let's think about it for a couple months, okay? No problem. I love you and Linda enough that I don't need another, if that's what you want. So, 3 months later, she said it would just be the three of us. Did I care? Not really. I had everything I wanted right now. How that cockroach crept back into our lives, I'll never know, but it did. Ken and his wife separated, and she got about 45% of his business. He wanted her to get stock in the company, but she wanted cash, and he ended up going into debt to pay her off. Her son wanted to live with his father, and their daughter went with Connie. There were rumors that Ken was playing dumb. Instead of divorcing, since there was no prenup, they just split everything up and went their separate ways. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When we saw him at one of the dinners, Shalia just looked at me. Steve, we're going to run into him from time to time. It's inevitable, she told me as she watched him walk in our direction. Good evening, guys. I haven't seen you in a while. For Shalia's sake, I was more than nice outwardly anyway. Good evening, Ken, I said, extending my hand. You're looking well. I'm sorry to hear about you and your blunders. I could look like I cared. In fact, inside I was gloating. You know, sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't, but life goes on. I heard you had a little mishap in your lab. I hope no one was badly hurt. It was a rookie mistake. It took a long time to prove it to Asha. They still nailed me pretty hard, but as they say, life goes on. Well, I've got to go, and I see 2 new pigeons that haven't donated yet today. Take care, and I hope to see you again, he said with a wide grin and left. In your dreams, I thought to myself. See, that wasn't so hard. We can still stay friends for the sake of the kids. She was right about the kids, but not Ken. I still didn't trust that son of a bitch, and I never would. Suddenly, it felt like we were running into him everywhere we went. What struck me was that he had never been with another woman. He was still good-looking and had more than enough money to satisfy any woman he wanted. It didn't bother me. It was just an observation. Okay, I let my guard down. I suppose Shalia, bumping into Ken here and there, thought that what I'd asked her to promise years ago was now null and void. But that wasn't the case for me. That 1/64th chasm had gotten even bigger. I never knew about the luncheons or the fundraising visits to other companies until a CEO of another company in the tri-state area I knew mentioned in passing that my wife and Ken had asked him for a donation 2 weeks ago. I assume it's for a good cause and your wife knows how to sell it. You should put her back on your payroll. However, that guy she was with, if it was just him, I'd probably still donate, but not as much as I do now. Between you and me, I wouldn't trust him one bit. But I guess that's just me. I don't trust almost anyone unless they're like your wife. He laughed, and I didn't. I waited almost 2 months before I said anything. I hoped she would tell me, but she never did, even though I left a bunch of hints. I finally exploded when she told me she was going on a 2-day fundraising trip. Are you going alone, or is Ken going with you? Shelia looked like I'd punched her in the gut with my fist. She was busted, and she knew it. Yeah, he's probably going with me and Gary. I think you know we've been raising money together for a while now, she said, sipping from her glass of water and waiting for what she knew was about to happen. I thought we had a deal? Yeah, but back then you were jealous of everyone who wore pants. I think we're both grown up and above that childish jealousy, plus we're all scheduled for 3. It's a huge 2-day swing that will take us 2 to 3 days. We need to get the funds before summer starts, so we know how many kids we can send to camp. Shelia, you promised me, remember? Grow up, okay? This is about the kids, not Ken. Steve, I'm an adult. I don't need your damn permission, and I'm going, it's too late to cancel. All those months you sat idle, and then when you missed our anniversary, I told you I wouldn't let you go back to work? No, we got over it. Shelia, you have no idea what you're doing. Steve, sometimes I just stop understanding you. That's how we broke up that night. Did we make love before she left? Do you think? Now that chasm was 1/8 of an inch wide. We followed each other around until she left, and for months after that. Did we make love again? Yes, but it wasn't the same. It was like we were both holding back, not wanting to give everything to each other. I tried to tell her we needed to talk, but all I got in response was sadness. Week after week, the gap widened. I tried many times to fix the situation, but we were going against fate. I'm going out of town on Tuesday and will be back Wednesday afternoon, she informed me. I need to find the last 3 companies to put us in the lead. No, was all I said. No to what? She replied. Yeah, if you're planning on going with Ken, then no, you're not going. Steve, we've been through all this before. I told you the reasons last time. And you promised me you wouldn't have any contact with Ken. I think we know how well you kept that promise. She only threw me an angry look. Steve, I'm leaving, she said, nipping at my heels. Like I said last time, think before you speak. You might not like the consequences of what you're about to do. I'm leaving, and nothing you say or do will change that fact, she muttered. She left on her trip and I stayed home and busied myself with rearranging our bedroom. Where's all my stuff? She asked when she returned. In your new bedroom. What new bedroom? Where the old guest room used to be. That's where all your stuff is. Fire burst out of her eyes. Great! Just great! She hissed, running back upstairs. It had been hell on earth since then, and in more ways than one. Now she flaunted her trips in front of me, almost expecting a confrontation, but I never gave her the satisfaction. When she stopped inviting me to fundraisers, I got angry but said nothing. When she invited the jerk into the house, I made sure he left without her, but not before I smashed his windshield with a tire iron. It was getting worse, so I asked him to follow her. I was waiting for her when she came home on Saturday just after midnight. I had a drink in my hand and sat in the dark. I replayed everything I was going to say 100 times or more in my head, but when she walked through the door, I forgot everything. Shelia. Steve, is that you? We need to talk. We can talk in the morning. I'm tired and all I want to do is go to bed. It's now or never. It's up to you, I told her. Okay, it's your call. What do you want to say? She sighed vindictively, putting her hands on her hips. Is it officially over now? Steve, what the hell are you talking about? What's over? Our marriage. Steve, what do you want? I want my wife back, but I don't think that's going to happen, do you? We haven't been husband and wife for months. And I think I've been replaced. She said nothing. Well, I had to try again anyway. Steve. I stopped her before she could say anything else. There are pictures of your last fundraiser with Ken on the counter. I half expected it to hang like some Greek god, and I'm a little disappointed. I saw her eyes redden. Here's how it's all going to go down. Tomorrow you will be taken to the house, and you will have 48 hours to leave the premises. There will also be a court order stating that you will not be allowed within 100 feet of this or any other house I own. You will be able to see Linda whenever you want, but only in this house. Obviously, Ken was more important to you than your own family. It finally began to get to her. Then she started to cry. I'm so sorry, it just happened, and I don't remember much of it. Shelia, that just doesn't happen. He planned the whole thing, and you were stupid enough to fall for his heartwarming stories, or he was comforting you because I wouldn't let you see him. Maybe I wasn't so stupid after all. You can't take Linda away from me, Steve. I already have. Get yourself a good lawyer because you're going to need one. By the way, along with the divorce papers, I'll send a copy of our prenup. It will be a good read for you and your lawyer. With those words, I left for the last time. I didn't feel like doing what I was about to do, but she left me no other choice. Ken paid for Shalia's lawyer. It didn't do her much good. I thanked my father for every day I spent in court. No matter how hard they tried, this agreement was impossible to break. My team, and yes, I said team, of attorneys had gotten me full custody because I could provide for Linda, while Shalia would have to go back to work to make ends meet. She received a lump sum of $50,000, a paid-for BMW, all her clothes and jewelry except those that belonged to my mother, and finally, liberal visitation privileges. We agreed on 2 times a week and every weekend. I knew she would eventually move in with Ken because her parents had practically disowned her, but for my daughter's sake, I decided I would act on the high ground. It all happened quickly. In a little over 3 months, our divorce was finalized, and I was free of both of them. Whenever I saw them at an event or on the street, Ken would tell me, I stole your wife, and Shalia would always avert her eyes. Like I said, I tried to keep a low profile until something became clear. Daddy, I don't want to sleep over at Mommy's anymore, Linda told me one Friday night. Linda, honey, your safety means more to me than any trouble your mom can get me into. I love you. Now go upstairs and let me deal with your mom. Okay, I was wrong. Sheila called me every name possible when I told her I wouldn't let Linda go with her. My dad had always helped me in the past, but now I was asking him for something that could get me in a lot of trouble, and yet I had no one else I could confide in. Dad, I need you to take Linda with you. Leave the country tomorrow. I lose this case and they'll make me give Sheila overnight visits with Linda. Dad, I won't put Linda in danger. Here's her passport, birth certificate, and 5 cashier's checks for $100,000 each. That's enough money for you to live on until things settle down. I don't want to know where you'll end up, but it better be someplace away from the road if you know what I mean. Let me know sometime in 6 months, and if you don't hear back, wait another 6 months. Steve, I'm meeting someone right now, and if you don't mind, I'd like to take her with me. You old dog, I said, smiling. Take whoever you want, but it has to be tomorrow morning. I don't have time. On Thursday, I kissed my daughter goodbye. I didn't know how long it would be before I saw her again, but I knew it wouldn't be long. She cried and apologized, and I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. I kissed and hugged her one more time and she left, bringing only a small pink backpack with her clothes and her stuffed bunny. I didn't sleep that night, and in the morning I was back in court. Mr. Moore, the court orders you to renew your visitation rights with your ex-wife, effective today. You will deliver Linda to her mother today, or be held in contempt of court. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, I understand, was all I told her. As I left the court, I walked over to Carl and told him what was likely to happen. It will be up to you to keep my baby running smoothly. Do whatever you need to do. Here's my power of attorney, so you can legally sign my name to anything you need. I don't know how long it will take, but I have faith in your ability to do the right thing. After that, I went home, poured myself a stiff drink, and waited. My phone kept ringing. I knew who it was, so I just let it ring. When Sheila showed up at the house with a police officer, I just opened the door, let her in, and went back to my drink. Steve, where is she? Where's who? I said, playing the game. You know who. Where's Linda? You mean she's not upstairs? Well, then she must be at one of her friends. You know she has a lot of friends. You were supposed to deliver her to me this morning, and if you don't deliver her, this man will take you to jail. You really are a foolish woman, do you know that? Do you really think I would knowingly put Linda in danger for you or anyone else? I guess you never really knew me well. I smiled at her and continued. Like I said, she's probably at her friend's house. My smile pissed her off even more. I was taken into custody, driven downtown, and placed in a cell. The next morning, I appeared before Judge Thomas and was told to bring my daughter in. My attorney, Victoria, did her best, but the judge wanted to hear only one thing from me, the whereabouts of my daughter. Your Honor, I'm not exactly sure where my daughter is, I told the judge. Well, Mr. Moore, perhaps a few nights in a cell will refresh your memory. Mr. Stephen Moore, I find you guilty of contempt of court. You will be held in custody until you provide the whereabouts of your daughter, Linda Moore, and allow Sheila Moore court-ordered visitation. And so it began. After 4 months, Sheila wanted to meet with me. I refused the first couple times, but then curiosity took over. You've lost a little weight, she said, as we sat down at a simple wooden visitor's table. Just getting rid of some extra weight I've been carrying around for the past few years. Steve, I don't want to do that, but I want to see my daughter. She told you what was going on. I warned you, but you just didn't listen, and now we've both lost what we valued most. I changed my petition to court-supervised visitation. Weren't you told? I heard, but I don't believe you anymore. You've gotten good at lying, remember? Steve, this is old news. We have to move on. We're not married anymore. That's your fault, not mine. Does it matter whose fault it was? To me, it does. I've never cheated on you in all the time we've been married. Surely you can't say that, can you? It was only once, you have to believe that. And that was after that big fight that happened before I left. So I guess you figured you'd show up that son of a bitch and spend 2 days in bed with Ken. You played right into his hands. You think I don't know that now? If I told you I was drunk and don't even remember it, would it make a difference? Your man had those ugly pictures and I only have vague memories. I can apologize until hell freezes over, but you'll never forgive me, so what's the point? The point is that I'm not going to let that goddamn son of Ken even come close to our daughter. You may not think that's important, but I do. I don't trust you anymore because even though I gave you a free pass and a way out, you still lied to me, and now you have to live with that decision for the rest of your life. One more thing. Remember those pictures of you and Ken? If they somehow get on the internet, how effective will your fundraising be after that? They might give you a couple bucks for sitting around, but what self-respecting CEO would give money to someone like that? You wouldn't give it? I didn't say I would because I'm in jail where you put me. But if some sneaky bastard wanted to get back at you, I wouldn't be able to stop him. Can you imagine the look on your mother's face if someone emailed them to your house? Or maybe the church they attend? With dates like theirs, everyone could easily figure out what you were doing with someone other than your husband while you were married. Do you hate me that much? You have no idea what I'm willing to do to protect our daughter. I think we know where we stand. Besides, you need to be there to support your new man when his world comes crashing down. Steve, what are you up to? What can I do? I'm in prison, remember? A month later, Carl came to me with his usual news. Steve, I got everything you asked for. Everything checked out and fully documented. We have not one, but two parts, if you know what I mean. I'm ready to get to work. All you have to do is just say the word. Carl, you have to do me a big favor today. I explained to him what I needed. You're kidding, right? No. Do what I asked you to do and then come see me on Thursday. Then I'll let you know how to proceed. Tuesday night, I slept great. I would have slept through breakfast too if the guard hadn't told me I had a visitor. Good morning, Ken, I said with a huge smile on my face. I guess it's a beautiful day outside, although I haven't had a chance to see it in a while. Cut the crap, Steve. Your man said you had something important to tell me. I'm here, talk, you have 5 minutes. Ken, I know Shalia is living with you now. That brought a contemptuous smile to his ugly face. Not only lives with me, but she has fun with me every night, he sniggered. Just stick to the plan, I told myself. Anyway, I want you to kick her out of your apartment today and sign a written agreement that you will never see or talk to her again. Is that understood? Are you out of your mind? And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to set the hounds of hell on you, and my friend, you're not going to like it, believe me. You stupid weakling, I took your woman, and now you threaten me from here? You're pathetic at best. If that's all you're capable of, I'm leaving. Getting Sheila into bed with me was so easy. 3 drinks with a little extra in each, and she was all mine. Do you know she cried for you for almost 4 days straight? She kept thinking that when the divorce became final, you would change your mind and take her back. You lost. But now a few drops of my special elixir into her drink and she's mine. You can do whatever you want with her. And don't try to blackmail me with those stupid pictures. I set up a camera that first night and burned everything to DVD. Maybe I'll send you a copy if you're polite. He got up to leave. Don't worry, I'll show myself. I had to convince him to tell me what really happened. I felt bad letting him walk out the door, but I knew I'd get the last laugh. Well, boss, what do you want me to do? Said Carl, looking around. Carl, you know what you do to a cockroach if you find one? You crush it under your foot. I told Ken I was going to let the hellhounds out, and he laughed at me. Do it, and do it today. I gave him another set of instructions, and I didn't even care if it was recorded on the prison monitors. 2 days later, Collins Manufacturing Company came under investigation for falsifying test data. It turned out that about 30% of the parts had not even been tested, and the tests that had been done were mostly falsified. Parts that did not meet specifications were given approval stamps, shipped, and displayed to the military. One former employee stated that he could no longer live with the knowledge that parts going into military aircraft did not meet the specifications on the orders. A government spokesman said all open orders have been suspended and all Collins manufacturing assets have been frozen pending further investigation. I think this former employee will sleep much better tonight in his new position, knowing that he did the right thing by disclosing a potentially deadly situation at his previous company. I was feeling pretty good now, even though I was still in jail. Collins Manufacturing's stock dropped like a stone. Ken's face was all over the news for the next few weeks, and criminal charges were now pending. Coincidentally, a videotape of Ken Collins was turned over to the district attorney yesterday. The video shows Ken admitting to an inmate in the county jail that he slipped an unidentified woman something in her drink and forced himself on her not once, but many times. At this time, no woman has come forward to support these charges, but the case is still pending. About a week later, I appeared before Judge Thomas again. Mr. Stephen Moore, you are free to go. Your ex-wife has dropped all charges against you and has asked the court to release you. I don't know what kind of game you've been playing with this court, but I strongly advise that you do not find yourself in front of my bench again. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. Case dismissed, she said, banging the gavel on her bench. The bailiff announces the next case, please. And that was the end of it. Well, Steve, you're a free man, Vicky told me. Hopefully, now that it's all behind you, you can get back to your normal life. Vicky, after what has happened to me over the last 9 months, nothing will ever be normal again. I just hope that all the guilty parties get what they deserve. I walked out of the courthouse and Carl picked me up on the street. How does it feel to finally be free? Wonderful, just wonderful. I've done everything you asked, and your father's flight will arrive at 10 o'clock tonight. It will be routed through customs, so no one will know Linda is back in the country. That won't be necessary anymore. Everyone who was a problem is already behind bars or will be soon. Take me to the nearest bar. I need a cold beer, and I'm not going to wait until I get home. Carl and I headed to the first bar we could find. After Miller Lite and Corona, we walked into Longhorn Steakhouse, and I had a proper meal for the first time in almost 6 months. You look better than anyone I've ever seen, boss. You've lost weight, and you don't have that little bulge around your middle anymore. Do 200 squats and 100 push-ups twice a day, and you'll lose that middle too. I guess Burger King for lunch every day from now on has been eliminated. I laughed and ate the last bite of steak. You know Sheila has been staying at our house for the last couple weeks. When I told her about Ken and his son, she freaked out. I had to get someone to stay with her for the first 2 days until she calmed down. She's still not herself. She wants to know if you're going to talk to her. I said you would see her tonight. I guess I forgot to tell her about Linda and your father coming over tonight. For the past few months, I had been thinking about her and Linda almost every waking hour. I knew that sooner or later I would have to deal with this problem, but I had other concerns. My daughter was coming home. Linda saw me and rushed into my arms, almost breaking my neck, so tight she hugged me. Daddy, I missed you so much. Do I have to go away again? She said with a more than worried expression on her face. Never again, sweetie, never again. Let's go home. My dad walked over with a tall blonde man and stood behind us. He shook my hand and then gave me a hug. You look a little thinner. I guess prison agreed with you, he said with that damn smile of his. Steve, this is Grace. She held out her hand. I took it and said it was nice to meet you, but I think we should get going. All the way home, my dad told me about where they were and how he moved every few weeks to make sure it was harder for anyone to find them. When this is over, I'd like to go back with Grace and see the places we found, he said, looking at her. My father was in love. Carl dropped us off at my house, and I told Linda that her mom was waiting for her inside. She ran into the house. I slowly walked into the house with my dad and Grace. When I walked through the door, I saw Linda and Sheila crying and hugging each other. Sheila looked at me and mumbled, "Thank you." I just nodded and went upstairs. For 2 hours, everyone gave me the news, but finally I saw everyone's eyes start to glaze over. It was time to call it a day. Linda had her own room, Sheila had her own room, and I had my old bedroom. Dad said he would see me in a couple days and came out with Grace. Steve, we need to talk, Sheila tried to say, but I told her we'd have time later. I took a long, hot shower in my own bathroom and went to bed in my own big, soft bed. It was heaven. It took me a long time to fall asleep. I was already used to the night noises from the prison, and my bedroom was almost too quiet. I don't know if Carl or Sheila restocked the refrigerator, but at 7 o'clock the next morning I was just happy to have real food for breakfast. Sheila came down a little after 8 in the white robe I'd given her years ago. Have you made coffee yet? Whole pot. Help yourself, I said, taking a second cup. Carl called me the day before you met Ken in prison. He told me everything and said it was in my best interest to not even go back to his house to get clothes. He kept me informed of what had happened, and that Ken was far worse than I could have imagined. Sheila, we shouldn't be talking about this right now, I tried to say, but she interrupted me. Steve, if I had talked to you months ago, none of this would have happened. But we didn't, and it did. I'm not even going to apologize because those words aren't even close to what I did to you and Linda in my stupidity. Just please don't take my little girl away from me. I can't live without her again. The tears were already flowing, and the hatred I felt was long gone, but she was no longer my wife. Sheila, you can stay here as long as you want. I'm not going to kick you out. Carl will pick up your clothes at Ken's house tomorrow. You're the least of his problems now, I said with a huge grin on my face. We're not married anymore, and we never will be. You chose him over me and Linda's safety, and I can never forgive you for that. She began to cry even harder. For our daughter's sake, you can stay here as long as you want. You'll have your own bedroom, and I'll have mine. Right now, Linda needs both of us to bring her back to reality, not two people pulling her in different directions. So if you agree, that's the way it's going to be, at least for now. The only request is that you don't bring any friends or lovers to my house. Is that understood? She nodded her head, but I could see she was an exhausted woman. She had lost everything by her own naive delusion, and she knew it. It had been 4 months since Linda had returned. Life was pretty much the same as it had been before things got out of hand. Dad had married Grace in a small family ceremony, and they were now somewhere in Mexico, sightseeing. I asked where he was going, and he just smiled at me. I told him to call me if he ran out of money. My business is doing better than ever, and when I was acquitted in the papers and all those asshole companies that swatted me started crawling back, I wanted to put the whole thing behind me, so I didn't cash in on them, at least not too much. Ken lost everything, and there are a lot of charges against him, and he'll probably spend 20+ years behind bars as the white bitch of someone named Bubba. I hope so. His ex-wife called and said she knows he's scum and hopes we can rebuild our lives. We have lunch from time to time, and she's a really wonderful woman I'd like to get to know better someday. Sheila still lives in the house. She's not dating. She is working part-time in the lab again while Linda is in school. I pay her like any other employee, but I contribute the maximum amount to her 401k each month. If I've learned anything in the last few years, it's that anything can happen when you let your guard down. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video. The phone rang sharply next to the sleeping Terry Gilson. He woke up abruptly. What the hell? He growled. The phone rang again. He picked it up. Hi, he murmured in a serious low cough. Mr. Gilson? Yes. This is Sergeant Preston from the Yukon County Police Department. May I speak to Mrs. Turvey? Bellowed an authoritative voice in Gilson's ear. Who's that? Mr. Gilson, please connect me to Mrs. Turvey. This is a police emergency. Again, the clear and demanding tone. A minute, Gilson muttered. He handed the receiver to the naked woman lying next to him. For you. It's the police, he said simply. What? She snatched the phone out of his hands. Hello? Good morning, my dear unfaithful wife, came the overly chipper greeting. I hope you slept well last night after you and your lover finished having fun. Oh my God, Mick? Mick, is that you? You can rest assured, sweetheart. I just called to give you some information you'll need. Mick. Please, she tried. First of all, you can throw away your house key. It doesn't work anymore. Also, I changed the code on the garage door opener. Mick, please, it's not what you think, she cried. You don't know what I think, Sheila. But I didn't call to discuss it with you. I called to tell you that your credit cards won't work anymore, and you can pick up your clothes and toiletries in the plastic tubs behind the side gate anytime you want. The voice turned as cold as ice. No. Mick, please, don't do this, please, my wife pleaded desperately. Too late, lovelies, I've already done it. But where shall I go? She cried. Well, in the immortal words of Rhett Butler, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. The tube slammed shut in anger. I had started this process weeks ago, but this particular morning was the defining moment. If I hadn't been so sure she was sleeping in Gilson's room, I wouldn't have even tried the trick. I was surprised at how easily it had worked out, and how empty the moment had seemed. A cuckold's victory, I thought. Too little, too late. I suppose that's appropriate to describe my situation. My name is Michael McTurvey. I am 43 years old, and I work as a sales representative for a building materials company. I have been with this company for over 20 years. I married Sheila Pratt almost exactly 20 years ago. We were to celebrate our 20th anniversary next month. I considered the marriage a success, for we had 2 wonderful children. Our first, Angela, my angel, was born a year and a half after we were married, and Ben, our son, was born 2 years later. I loved my wife and children unconditionally. They were the meaning of my existence. No man could be prouder of his family than I was. We lived in a modest home, but it had everything a family could want. The 3-bedroom split level was our second home, purchased 4 years ago. It wasn't new, but we made an effort to update it and make it our own. New kitchen, then a finished basement with a workshop for me, and a large family room that the kids could use for their entertainment. A garage where we actually parked our cars, and then new furniture for the living room and dining room. I felt like we had the perfect life. I met Sheila when we were both students in 11th grade. She was a pretty blonde with a nice body, so it wasn't hard to notice her. She tried out for cheerleading but was unsuccessful. I played receiver on the soccer team and thought we might make a good couple. I asked her out right after school started in the fall, and she said yes. We had been dating for a few months, and in that time Sheila had matured into a very beautiful girl. I wasn't the only one who noticed. I thought we were dating, but never seemed to confirm it with Sheila. The next thing I knew, our quarterback Terry Gilson asked her out and she said yes. I couldn't understand that. I thought we were a couple, but apparently I was wrong. Gilson was the star of our team. He was a big, talented high school senior with a strong arm and a will to win unlike anything I had ever encountered. As a quarterback, he was a coach's dream and a coach's nightmare. He had tremendous talent and fearlessness, but he just couldn't follow orders. As the rest of the team realized, Terry was not a team player. Terry was just Terry. Our team finished that season with a winning record, but I wondered how much better we could have been if Terry had stuck to the coach's script instead of making it up as he went along. For all his talent, he was undisciplined and very frustrating for all of us who worked in his shadow. Terry often bragged about entertaining every cheerleader at least once. I was grateful that Sheila wasn't a cheerleader, but I wasn't sure that would protect her. There was no point in my being angry at Gilson. He was what he was, a ruthless womanizer. He viewed these young girls as meat on his plate and intended to enjoy them. I was hurt that Sheila had fallen in love with him, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Terry would be gone next year, and Sheila and I would still be here. Maybe I still had a chance. But it didn't happen. I started dating Marilyn Ehrlicher. Since seating at our school was alphabetical most of the time, Marilyn most often sat behind me and had me in her sights. Marilyn was a nice girl, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted something more exciting, but that was asking too much of Miss Ehrlicher. We got along fine, and I think she was impressed that a soccer player was interested in her, but that was about it. In the spring, I started looking for a replacement. Meanwhile, Gilson had dumped Sheila in favor of some other girl, and she was available again. I thought about it, but given the way she dumped me, I decided to ignore her. By the end of the year, she had found someone else, and I was on the sidelines again. In 12th grade, things were different. Roger Davidson became the quarterback of our team, and he turned out to be something Terry Gilson was not. He was a leader and a better team player. He looked to us to determine who could do what. I thought more than once that this guy could make a coach. He understood what it took to win and to get the most out of what the team had to offer. The result was great. I was catching passes like never before and we were winning regularly. When Roger would go into the huddle, he would be quiet, tell the play, and make sure everyone knew how to act. This was all new to me, and I loved it. I continued to avoid Sheila. My ego still hurt from my affair with Gilson. I wasn't really surprised when Roger started dating her. For all his talent and leadership, he was a quiet guy and it was hard not to like him. Oddly enough, I was fine with them. If I couldn't be with her, Roger was my choice. I think she felt the same way. Sheila wasn't the smartest girl in school. In fact, she scored an average C average and, like many of her classmates, got a job. She never had plans for college. She must have realized her limitations. She took a job as a bank teller at the mall. After high school graduation, I lost touch with her. I was on my way to college and already dreamed of playing soccer, drinking beer with the boys, and dating only the prettiest girls who would aspire to be with the soccer hero. By Christmas, reality set in. I failed 3 classes, and while I enjoyed every minute I spent on the soccer field, the rest of my campus experience was not so enjoyable. There was no line of girls waiting to go out with me. Beer was downtown and expensive for my limited budget. Classes were a torment, and it was hard for me to realize that the learning process was solely up to me. There was no one to monitor me and make sure I was attending class or completing assignments. It was a very different world. The grades posted on the board at the end of the semester were disappointing. I was in danger of dropping out. Well, I said to myself, next semester, no soccer and no girlfriends. I might as well do this. It wasn't easy. It was a whole new way of life for me. It was a struggle. I made it through, but not by much. With a year of college under my belt, I wondered if this was what I wanted to do for the next 3 years. If I asked that question, I thought the answer was obvious: no. I found a job in an office in the city, and every morning I would get on the bus, work my 9 hours, get on the bus again, and go home. After a few months, I realized that this couldn't be my future. I needed something more. I lasted almost 2 years, but I was constantly looking for something better. If you asked me what my career path would be when I graduated from high school, I would have no idea. I certainly wouldn't include the sales category. In my mind, a salesperson is someone who goes door to door selling brushes, kitchen utensils, or magazines. That's definitely not me. I got a different perspective when I saw what industrial sales was all about. You had to know your product and show people that it was a good, if not better product than the one they were using, and then convince them to buy it. More importantly, the technical side was something I could get passionate about. It didn't take me long to realize that sales is a strategy. What do you have that the customer needs? Why would he want to buy it from you? I applied for a transfer to one of the operating branches and was given the opportunity to work in sales, an inside job. That was the beginning, and the more I saw, the more I realized that this was what I wanted to do. I went to work, still without a car and living at home. When I moved to the operations department, nothing had changed. I was a newcomer with a small salary and I traveled to and from work by bus. When I received my first paycheck, I decided to open a bank account. Until then, I had been living from paycheck to paycheck, and that was about to change. For convenience, I chose a bank near the bus stop and walked in. As I approached the customer service counter, I stopped in my tracks. The young woman who was soon to serve me was named Sheila Pratt. I was a little worried, but since I had a few more people ahead of me, I had a chance to calm down and think about what I wanted to say. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, but as much as I studied her, she was just as beautiful as I remembered her. It didn't take Sheila long to take care of the people in front of me, and then it was my turn. "Hi, Sheila," I said, stepping forward. She obviously didn't know I was standing in line and was surprised to see me in front of her. "Hi, Mick," she said after a moment's pause. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to open an account. I need to deposit my paycheck into it." Oh, of course. Let me get one of the staff to help you," she said, smiling. "Yes, thanks. It's good to see you again," I offered weakly. "Yeah, it's good to see you too." The smile was genuine, it seemed to me. A week later, I went back to the bank to pick up my blank printed checks and saw Sheila again. This time she was walking down the street, I realized, delivering mail. I watched her as I stood in line and wondered what was going on in her life. There was only one way to find out. After picking up the box of checks at the service counter, I looked around for Sheila and saw that she was standing behind the side counter, obviously not doing anything. I walked over to her. "Hello again," I said, smiling. "Hey, how's it going?" she asked. Her smile was the one I remembered from when we were dating. She was sincere, honest, and very attractive. "I'm fine. I work at Polar Industries now. I work in sales," I offered. "Well done. Do you like him? Does he have a good future?" she asked, seeming interested. "Yes. I like the company and the products it represents. I think I'm lucky." "Good, Mick. I'm glad to hear that. Sheila, would you like to have coffee with me? Or something else?" Hesitantly I asked. "We could catch up." "Sure, that would be nice. I'll be free in a few minutes." "Why don't you wait for me and we could go to the coffee shop next door?" she suggested. "Great," I said with a wide smile. "I'll be waiting out front on the bench." Thus began our reunion, and within a few dates we were back where we were. I was 21 years old and just starting my career, and Sheila was looking for a husband. I proposed the following spring and she accepted. A year later in May, we were married, and we were both excited about our future. A year and a half after we were married, Angela was born. She was a daddy's girl from the moment she was born. When she was little, if she was upset or crying, I would pick her up in my arms. She would calm down, smile at me, and all was well again. I always thought I wanted a son, but Angie was everything I could have wished for. Our son, Ben, was born 2 years later, and I was as happy as only a father can be. Sheila was Ben's special parent, and I was Angela's special parent. It was the perfect family, I thought. Sheila often told me the same thing. She was happy and content with our lives, she told me. We had our moments, but they never lasted long, and I knew I was lucky. I had a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful children. Right after Angie was born, I was given a sales territory and was on cloud 9. I fell into the job like a duck into water, and within a couple of years I was earning almost double what I started with. Success breeds success, and now I was earning much more than I expected when I started at Polar. 5 years later, we were able to buy our first house. It was a small bungalow, but it was all ours. Sheila spent hours leafing through magazines looking for the right things. Angie and Ben contributed too, but it was Sheila who chose the decor and colors. I just stood in admiration of how my family had come together. We celebrated our 10th anniversary at the same house, and over 30 people came to the anniversary party. I was proud of my accomplishments, but I was even more proud of my family. My children were well-behaved and excelled in school. My wife was an exemplary housewife and mother. Both parents believed that the sun and moon revolved around us. What more could I want? When Angie turned 14, she started menstruating. At first, Sheila was happy to help Angie understand what was happening and how to deal with it. Things went well for a few weeks, and then I noticed a change. Angie didn't seem to be as close to her mother as she used to be. It wasn't an obvious change, but to me, close to my daughter, it was noticeable. I could not find a reason for this change in attitude, and discussing it with Sheila proved frustrating. She did not want to discuss or even acknowledge this change. She claimed it was my imagination and a man's inability to understand female psychology. I was still concerned, but since the rest of the family didn't seem to be affected, I let it go. Ben always seemed to be on guard. He and his mother were very close, and although I loved him as much as Angie did, I knew that if there was a serious problem, he would turn to his mother for help first. That didn't bother me in the least. All families form alliances with their parents, and they should have been recognized and respected. Because of my success, I continued to climb the career ladder. And while I realized that sales management was probably not what I was cut out for, I wished I had at least been offered the opportunity. I had my most productive and profitable territory, and I wondered what it would take to take the next step. It finally dawned on me that in order for such an opportunity to arise, a position had to be filled. Shortly after Angie entered high school, Sheila came to me and asked if I would mind if she went back to work. She had been a stay-at-home soccer mom for 16 years and felt like she wanted something to do besides washing, ironing, and sewing. I couldn't think of a single reason why not, but asked her to make sure that whatever she chose would not interfere with the children's lives and our ability to enjoy free time together. She assured me that it would not interfere. After a few months of searching, she found a job at a car dealership as a receptionist. It was not full-time, and that suited us both. She had to work there in the mornings from 9 to 1 o'clock, Monday through Saturday. Since I was playing golf on Saturday mornings, I figured that schedule would suit me just fine. It didn't pay much, but we didn't starve, and her extra earnings could be used as vacation pay. If it suited her, it suited me. Our life continued for a couple more years until one day, Sheila came home with a disturbing message. "You know what, Mick?" she said, not without some trepidation. "What?" "Terry Gilson is back in town," she said, watching my reaction carefully. "Oh, what brought him back?" "You know his father is a big businessman. Terry is now the assistant general manager at his father's dealership," she said, still not as nonchalant as she wanted to seem. "And what kind of dealership would that be?" I asked, knowing full well the answer. Where I work, Century Ford," she stammered. "So, what does that mean to you?" I asked, starting to see something else creep into the picture. I'm going to be, I've been asked to take him on as an assistant," she finally mumbled. Wow. That's a big step. From part-time receptionist to assistant to the assistant to the assistant general manager. I didn't realize they had such a large staff. I'm sure my tone was sarcastic, and I didn't try to hide it. "Something you're not very happy about," she remarked. "No. You dated Gilson. I've played with him. We both know what kind of guy he is. He bragged about all his conquests. Is your name still on his list?" It was a cheap shot, and I realized it as soon as it sounded. "That's terrible. Are you telling me you don't trust me?" she demanded. I had to move. "No, I'm telling you I don't trust him." Her face flushed red, and for the first time in a long, long time she was very angry. "Mick, take that back. You have no right to accuse me of anything. And what's more, you just said I can't be trusted," she muttered. I made no such statement. I said I didn't trust him. I said we both know what kind of snake he is. It may have been 20 years, but leopards don't change their spots. I made sure she understood that I wouldn't back down an inch. "Just ask yourself this," I continued. "How can a part-time secretary go from entry-level employee to assistant to the boss's son in one step?" "I'd like to know," I demanded. "Because I have the talent for the job," she snapped back. "Terry said I was just made for it." "You don't think I have the ability, do you?" she challenged. "I don't know. I don't work there. But one thing I do know is that this whole deal smacks of typical Gilson. He's setting you up, and you'd better be very careful, my dear." Now I was standing right in front of her. She couldn't help but understand my misgivings and suspicions about Terry Gilson's motives. I could only hope that my message had reached her. "You're jealous. You don't want me to succeed because it will make you look bad." "That's the thing, you're jealous," she scoffed. The argument was going nowhere, and she wasn't listening. I sighed heavily, turned, and went down to the basement for a cold beer and some time to think. I had no illusions about Gilson's motives. He had seen an attractive woman he thought he could get without much effort. What did it matter if she was married? He probably remembered me from high school and didn't think I was much of a nuisance. I would keep a close eye on the situation, of that I was sure. It was a week before we returned to calm water in the house. My argument with Sheila was unfortunately overheard by our children. It was hard not to hear, as we both raised our voices. As always, when things calmed down, Angie came to me when I was alone. "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" "Hey, Angie, yeah, I'm fine," I lied. I couldn't help overhearing the argument, she admitted. "Who is this guy, Gilson?" "The one your mom dated in high school. He was our quarterback, and I played with him all year. I tried to warn your mom. He's not a very nice guy and doesn't have much respect for women," I said sadly. "I don't think you were telling Mom what she wanted to hear," she said softly. "No, I think not. I think she sees this as a big opportunity and an important job. She'll probably go from part-time to full-time, so I guess there will be some changes in our routine," I suggested. "It's okay, Daddy. I can help with the food and laundry and stuff." "I think she'll be making a lot more money now, don't you?" "Probably. We haven't gotten into that. I'll just have to wait and see, Angie. I hope this doesn't turn out to be a big mistake for your mom, I said, putting my hand on her shoulder and pulling her to me. I just hope everything turns out okay. As I suspected, it was a full-time job, and the pay was more than double her previous earnings, so in that respect, she was being rewarded handsomely for her role. However, I had my doubts about the job. When I cautiously asked Sheila what she did during the day, she answered vaguely, but what I heard sounded very unstructured. If I interpreted what she was telling me, it appeared that she had to resort to when Gilson called. As time went on, I became less and less concerned about her work. She left for work a little before 9 every morning and came home shortly after 5 in the evening. No overtime, no special assignments, just routine work. As a result, we didn't have to sacrifice much. My workday was longer than hers, and I was often home after 6, leaving in the morning at 7. I wasn't home before anyone was up, and so my family time was limited to evenings and weekends. Our sex life was never what I would call hot. It just wasn't Sheila. Even though we did it usually a couple times a week, it was plain vanilla stuff. I tried to get her interested in other things that were a little different, but she just wasn't interested. Since we were doing this twice a week, I couldn't complain. After Gilson came along, I kept a close eye on the changes in our sex life, but there was nothing unusual about it. We were doing pretty much the same things we'd been doing before. I've always tried to get along with my neighbors. It's a lot easier to live that way. The McDonalds on one side of us were quiet people and quite elderly. Their children had grown up and moved away, and we didn't have much in common with them. We were polite and helped each other if needed, but otherwise we weren't close. The Romanos who lived on the other side of us were very different. Their children were younger, and Angie often babysat for them the first few years we were there. We got along very well with them and often had backyard barbecues and card parties at each other's houses. Jimmy and Felicia were probably our best friends. Jimmy was an accountant and worked at the big GM dealership in town. I had already forgotten about it, but when he drove home a rented van with the dealership's name on the side, I remembered. One late Sunday morning, Jimmy was mowing the lawn before mowing, and I walked over to him for a moment to talk. "Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?" I began. "Well, the usual stuff." "I think it's okay," he grinned. "Yeah, same thing." "Say, I have a question for you." I tried to make it sound casual. "Shoot." "You work at a large dealership. Does the general manager usually have an assistant? Assistant general manager?" "Yes, big dealerships usually have someone to back up the boss when he's not around." "Will this assistant have an assistant like, say, Friday's girl?" He looked at me strangely, and then I saw a few lights come on. His face got funny and he looked really uncomfortable. "Not usually," he finally said. "I didn't think so," I said, nodding. "Thanks, Jimmy." I turned and headed back to the house. My suspicions were confirmed. "Mick," he called out to me. I stopped and turned around as he came toward me. "I know what you're thinking. I have some acquaintances there. Let me see what I can find out about QT," he said in a low voice. I stared at him for what seemed like a very long time, then nodded. "Thanks again." I'm not sure why, after all this, I asked Jimmy that question. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. There wasn't the slightest hint that anything was going on, but I suppose the thought had been on my mind, and still is. Jimmy knew who Sheila worked for and what her position was, but he never said a word about it. I just stumped him and he reacted the way a good friend should. Even though Sheila was no longer working on Saturday morning, I continued to play golf early in the morning. The Saturday following my conversation with Jimmy was cool and windy, but at least it didn't rain. I played with our usual foursome, and none of us played very well. The wind intensified the cold, and none of us were very comfortable. We were all happy to finish the round and get to the clubhouse. As we usually did, after the changeover, we would meet at the 19th hole, and the winners would toast the losers. Today, my partner and I were the winners. As I walked into the lounge, I saw Jimmy Romano sitting alone at a table by the TV. He was sipping a drink, so I approached him. "I didn't know you played golf," I said with a smile. You know me better than that," he laughed. "What brings you here?" I asked, almost guessing the answer. "I wanted to talk to you alone," he said, suddenly serious. I nodded. I was sure that was it. Give me a minute to settle with the winners and I'll be right back, I promised. It didn't take me long to buy drinks for the boys and explain that I had to excuse myself to meet someone. 5 minutes later, I was already sitting at Jimmy's table. So I can only assume you heard something about my recent question, I said, leaning back in my chair. Yeah. I wish the news was better, Mick. I really wish it was, he said sadly, hardly looking me in the eye. Give it to me straight, Jimmy. I can handle it, I said with more confidence than I felt at that moment. Gilson is probably the most unpopular guy at this dealership. People I've talked to consider him a leech on the side of the business and completely useless. He goes around and pisses off everyone he encounters. He has nothing to do because no one wants him to do anything. He'll just screw things up, as he's demonstrated many times before. Jimmy stopped and sipped from his glass. No surprise there, I said, trying to remain calm. So where's Sheila? He looked at me with the most haggard look I'd ever seen on his face. He really didn't want to tell me what he was going to tell me. Sheila sits in his office most of the day, occasionally typing letters and bringing him coffee. The only time she acts fast is when old man Gilson shows up, and she quickly disappears into the parts department or the employee break room. When the old man leaves, everything goes back to normal, Jimmy says. I guess old Gilson doesn't know about Sheila and her mysterious work, I said sullenly. Jimmy only nodded. Then he paused, and I realized there was more to it. Spit it out, Jimmy. I won't bite, I promised. The two of them go out to lunch about twice a week. They leave just before noon and don't come back until 2 or 2:30. Since she's been there? Said I, finally shocked. No. It started a few months later, he suggested. One day one of their slick salesmen followed them. They went to the Carlton Hotel on Banner Road. That's a long way to go for lunch, I suggested. Mick, there's no restaurant at the Carlton, he said in almost a whisper. I felt everything inside me clench. I was locked in place, unable to move. I could hear my intermittent breathing, trying to get my thoughts in order. Although I suspected this might happen, I wasn't prepared for it. I can't remember how long it took before I was able to form a coherent thought. I'm sorry, Mick. I really didn't mean to be the guy who, he muttered. I know, I whispered huffily. I didn't want to hear it either. We had another drink with Jimmy and reminisced about the good times our families had spent together. There were many happy memories, but it felt like we were saying goodbye to each other in a way. I think we both realized now that things would never be the same again. I could feel that pain in my gut, and it hurt. I drove home, preparing to see Sheila and pondering how I was going to handle this revelation. I had been strangely calm with Jimmy, and it seemed odd that I would be able to handle this devastating news. I tried to imagine any scenario that would make their afternoon visits to the Carlton anything other than sexual, but I realized it was unlikely. What was on the surface was still there. It wasn't until I was halfway home from the golf club that I started to get angry. My head was spinning with 1,000 random thoughts all at once, and my emotions were in turmoil before it all started to boil down to one horrible fact. She had cheated on me, and cheated on me many, many times. I was a fool, even though I knew the possibility existed. She made a fool of me, and didn't even blink an eye without feeling the slightest sense of guilt. Day after day she made me a cuckold. It was then, with that realization, that the anger began to build. I pride myself on being rational and not prone to rash behavior. I pulled over to the curb a few blocks from my house because I knew I was in no condition to walk into my house and confront Sheila. Moreover, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. In fact, I was pretty sure it wasn't. If I thought it was just a one-time fling, I could get over it and we could move on with our lives. But it wasn't. Apparently, it had been going on for a year. All this time, Sheila had been playing the role of a happy housewife with a loving family. It was a deception of a very high order. Sitting in my idling car, I decided that this called for a very high order of payback. I will act as normal as possible, but on Monday I will start the process to end this farce and get my revenge. I am determined that I will cause Terry Gilson and Sheila Pratt-Turvey as much harm as possible. I will act according to the rules and the law, but I will do everything I can to bring them both down. The rest of the weekend passed with excruciating politeness on my part. I was tight-lipped, not allowing my anger and frustration to spill out onto my family. There was plenty of time for that when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I counted the hours until Monday morning. When Monday finally came, I got up earlier than usual and left the house well before 7. I knew I had a few hours before I could get started on my problem, but I wanted to get out of our house as soon as possible that morning. I knew that my sales manager, Larry Coleman, was already in the office, and I needed to talk to him about taking some time out of his day to address my problem. Our conversation took over half an hour. I knew he had guessed what might be going on in my family life when I explained what I wanted in terms of a vacation, and thankfully he was receptive and agreed. He was a nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him. Just after 9 in the morning, I called David Murney, our family lawyer, and asked for advice on a family matter. I knew it was not his specialty, and was not surprised when he referred me to Lydia Pankratz. I had met Lydia in passing once or twice and had heard she was a very good divorce attorney. She wouldn't be cheap, but at this point the expense was the last thing on my mind. That afternoon, I had an appointment with Lydia for late afternoon. I knew I would be late, so I called home to leave a message. Angie answered the phone, which surprised me. "Hey Angie, what are you doing home?" "Teacher Professional Development Day," she said with a touch of mockery. "Ever notice they're always on Fridays or Mondays?" "Yeah, I noticed. Look, I have an appointment late tonight, and I won't be home until 7, I think. Let Mom know, okay?" "Sure, Dad." "Say, are you okay?" she asked with curiosity in her voice. "Yes, of course. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You didn't seem like yourself this weekend." "You weren't sick or anything, were you?" "No," I lied. "There's nothing wrong with me." "You must have an overactive imagination," I laughed. We signed, and I hung up the phone, wondering if Sheila had noticed my unusual behavior. She didn't say anything, but maybe she was being cautious. We'd have to watch for that. I didn't want to tip too soon. Meeting Lydia came as a shock to him in many ways. To begin with, regardless of the reason, Sheila got half of everything in the divorce. The house, the cars, everything. The only good news was that her income was such that I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony if I could prove infidelity. Judging by her reckless behavior, I doubted I'd have any trouble getting proof. As for the children, I would have to prove abuse, neglect, or some other horrible crime to get custody. In this jurisdiction, children were almost always given to the mother. Angie was 18 and could make her own decision, but Ben was only 16 and would have to spend almost 2 years with his mother. I felt bad, but Lydia said I probably couldn't change anything. That's just the way the system works. That's when things got interesting. Lydia knew of my overwhelming desire to punish both Sheila and Gilson, and she said she could help. Since Gilson was her boss, I could sue both him and the company he worked for as co-defendants in the divorce case. In other words, since so many people knew about their little game and did nothing to stop it or report it, we could sue them for a very large sum of money. Better yet, none of that money would go to Sheila. Lydia said she would make inquiries about Century Ford and begin the paperwork for the divorce proceedings. At this point, the reason for the divorce remained open. I was to decide whether it would be irreconcilable differences or infidelity. Lydia suggested that since their liaisons were so predictable, it would not be difficult or expensive to get some photographic evidence to solidify the case. I told her I would think about it. When I got home that evening, a happy Sheila greeted me, informing me that my dinner was already in the oven, and she poured me a glass of wine. I was immediately suspicious. Such behavior was unusual for her. I went upstairs, changed my clothes, washed my face, and went down to dinner. When I sat down at the table, Sheila sat down too, also with a glass of wine. "I have some interesting news, Mick," she began with a broad smile. "Oh?" "I've been invited to the Regional Dealer Convention next month in Marysville," she said proudly. "Really?" "Just you?" I asked, almost knowing the answer before I even asked it. "Well, no. Terry and Kurt Jenkins are going too," she said with some nervousness. "Oh, I see. And how long does this convention last?" 3 days. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be back on Sunday." Now the nervousness was fully evident. Sounds like you're looking forward to it," I quipped. "Yes, this will be my very first convention. I'm sure I'll learn a lot." She changed in an instant. Now she had that happy enthusiasm in her again that she had a moment ago. "Yes, I don't doubt it," I replied with slight sarcasm. As my mind picked up on my emotions, I began to realize that this could be the opportunity I was looking for. She almost set herself up to be caught. So, you're okay with that? She asked uncertainly. Yes, dear. I don't mind. I trust you. I know you won't do anything inappropriate, I said, with as straight a face as I could muster. I saw the blush on her face for only a moment before she stood up, leaned across the table, and kissed me. Thanks, Mick. I finished my meal in silence, and Sheila went back into the living room to watch some mindless TV program. I found it strange that I wasn't upset or angry or anything. I was numb. I had just let my wife go out of town for 3 days and have fun with some asshole I hated, and I felt nothing. The next 2 days went fine, just normal. I got through my work, but my mind was a mess of thoughts, and I wondered how it was all going to turn out. I started thinking about Ben and Angie. What would they think? How would they react? When I destroyed their mother, would they hate me? I couldn't think of a way to protect them from what I was about to do, other than to call the whole thing off and let Sheila continue doing what she was doing. Deep down, I knew I would never let that happen. On Thursday morning, Lydia called me at the office and asked me to meet her in the afternoon. We set the time for 3, and I arrived early. I wanted to bring her up to speed and start the process. I made a few decisions. Lydia, something interesting happened on Monday. Sheila told me that she's been invited to attend the regional Ford dealer convention in Marysville in 3 weeks. It won't surprise you to learn that she'll be going with Terry Gilson and another guy from their office. I paused, waiting for her reaction. You're right. There's no surprise at all. My sources say the whole thing was set up a long time ago. I guess she finally got up the courage to tell you on Monday, she said calmly. Yes, Monday. How did you know? I asked with a smile. Well, it's a trade secret. But let's just say she's not as smart as she thinks she is, Lydia grinned. I've decided we should try to get some pictures. Will that allow us to file an infidelity report? I asked. Yes, definitely. Now we know they use the same room in the same hotel every time. That's silly. My friend is getting some photographic evidence this week, and that should be enough to make the case. But that's not all, she grinned. I looked at her satisfied smile and waited for the next news. Century Ford is owned by Terry Gilson's father, Knox Gilson, as you probably know. I know there is a morals clause in every employee's contract, and this will make our additional lawsuit much easier. In fact, it will be a piece of cake, she smiled slyly. How much do you think we can get them for? I asked, feeling an evil streak awaken in me. Well, we'll probably get $500,000 to $1 million, but of course we'll ask for a lot more. God knows Father Terry can afford it, she laughed. I really like the sound of it. I guess the only bad thing is the kids. I can protect Angie, but I can't do anything for Ben, I said, suddenly realizing how fast things were moving. I know, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it. Unless we get a judge who thinks Sheila's scum, we're going to have to live with it. I'm sorry, but I wish it wasn't so, she said with genuine pity. All right, Lydia. Thanks for the shovel job. I'll let you know when and where the convention will be held, and what hotel she'll be staying at, in case your boyfriend can't find out anything before then. I'm tired. This whole mess had taken all the strength out of me. I wanted to go home and go to bed for a week or 3, hoping it would all be over by then. Of course, I knew it wouldn't be. There was still a long way to go. I managed to get through the next 3 weeks without arousing Sheila's suspicions. Maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was just so sure of herself that she didn't worry about it. On the eve of her departure, she had packed and carried her suitcase and travel bag to the front door, preparing to leave in the morning. She had no idea what this weekend had in store for her. When I got up Thursday morning at my usual time, Sheila was already up and eating breakfast. She was definitely anxious to get going, and she was pacing nervously around the kitchen. "You're up early," I remarked coolly. "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything was taken care of before I left." "Don't worry about it. Angie will take care of the housework, and I'll help her on the weekends. I take it you'll be home Sunday morning?" I offered. "I'm not sure if it will be in the morning or afternoon. We'll have to wait and see. It's Terry's car, so I'll let you know," she said hesitantly. She avoided my gaze. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't want to look me in the eye and admit it to herself. She couldn't know that there was no getting away from this weekend. Have a good time and behave yourself, I said without a fraction of sarcasm. She gave me a brief glance, then continued her uncoordinated activity. I couldn't remember ever seeing her so nervous. Perhaps she sensed the change in my attitude and was afraid I might recognize or suspect something. I couldn't tell. I finished my coffee, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and left for the office. All day I wondered if she thought I knew something. It might ruin my surprise, and that would really upset me. I didn't tell Lydia or anyone else what I planned to do early Sunday morning. Upon arriving at the office, I called Lydia and she quickly got on the phone. Lydia, can you confirm that we have pictures of Gilson and Sheila in action? I asked quickly. Yes, we have them. But I don't think you'll want to see them. Maybe after this is over. But for now, just let us deal with it, okay? She spoke in a muffled voice, and you couldn't tell from her tone that she wasn't happy. I had to assume that the pictures were going to be quite denigrating. The only good thing about it was that it no longer mattered whether my little stunt on Sunday morning had worked or not. The matter was now settled. Are all the divorce papers ready? Yes. We can serve it when you say so. I have a little surprise for her on Sunday morning, so I think we can serve her at her parents' house on Monday morning. Can I confirm that on Sunday? I asked. Yes, but Mick, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? There was concern in her voice. No, absolutely not. I won't do anything to mess this up. I promise. I hoped my statement was reassuring to this dynamic lady. I didn't want anything to ruin my plans. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Take care of yourself, Mick. I know these are hard times for you, but they'll pass and you'll move on. I know it, she said sincerely. Lydia, I couldn't have done it without your help. The only thing that remains difficult is telling the kids on Saturday about what's going on. I'm not looking forward to it, I admitted. I'm sure you don't. Good luck. If you need anything, call me or David, okay? Thank you, I signed, quietly hanging up the phone. I thought about telling the kids that night, but changed my mind. One of them might decide to call their mother and warn her. I wanted to minimize that risk. Sheila called around 8 o'clock that evening, and her voice was very chipper. She enjoyed the convention and the various booths. She had a nice room and the restaurant served very good food. She talked to me briefly, but spent more time on the phone with Angie and Ben. She gave us her room number, 1228. When the kids went to bed at the usual time, 10 o'clock, I waited until I was sure they were asleep and then called the hotel and asked for room 1228. If Sheila answered, I would just say goodnight and say something nice to her. The phone rang at least 7 or 8 times, but there was no answer. I hung up. Sheila called Friday night, again around the same time. As before, we had a brief conversation, and then she talked to Angie and Ben. She spoke differently. Perhaps the excitement of the convention had passed, or maybe something else. On Saturday, she called early, just before 6. Luckily, we were all home. Once again, our conversation was short and not very personal. She was going out to dinner with a large group and, according to her, wouldn't be home until late. I was not displeased. I was relieved. When Angie, Ben, and I sat down to dinner, the table was very quiet. We all seemed to be immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, I realized that I couldn't put it off any longer. We cleared the table, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and I turned to them both. Kids, I need to talk to you about something, I began. Ben and Angie looked at me, and I sensed they were guessing what this was about. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just tell you what's going to happen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 shiny new house keys. These are your new keys to this house. The only person who has them is me. Your mother is not coming back to our house, I finally forced myself to say. Angie gasped. Ben's eyes widened and his mouth opened. For the past year, your mother has been having an affair with her boss, Terry Gilson. She betrayed me, you and her marriage vows. I can no longer live with her and will not allow her in this house, I paused. Oh, Daddy, oh no, Angie cried. Why did she do that? I don't know, but to be completely honest, it's not the most important thing on my mind right now. I know it's going to hurt you. There's nothing I can do about it. She, has been with Mr. Gilson at least twice a week for the last year. That's over 100 times. My anger started to come out, and I saw Ben wince slightly. This convention she's attending. It's nothing more than a smokescreen so they can be together for the weekend. Well, they're not fooling anyone, I spat. Dad, what's going to happen? Asked Ben, still shocked by my statements. I've filed for divorce and your mother will be served with the papers as soon as she gets back into town. There will be some other things happening with Mr. Gilson, but you don't have to worry about them now. I will let you know about them as they happen. I paused again. I'm sure they must have been shocked by my comments over the last 5 minutes. Does this mean I'll never see Mom again? Asked Ben, on the verge of tears. No, I wouldn't do that to you, Ben. I know how important she is to you and I wouldn't do that. Maybe you'll live with her from the beginning. When you're 18 like Angie, you can see both of us anytime you want. Angie, you can decide where you want to live. It will be your choice, I said, looking into my daughter's sad eyes. That sucks, Dad. It's splitting the family. It sucks, she said with tears in her eyes. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's the courts that make those decisions, not me. I thought long and hard about it. I suppose I could tell your mother everything I know and just get on with my life, but I couldn't do that. I have to admit, I'm very, very angry with your mother. She lied to us. She lied to us. I don't think I could just turn the other cheek, I admitted. Ben turned, walked quietly up the stairs to his room, and closed the door behind him. He's in shock, I thought. I'll go up and sit with him in a little while, when he's had time to realize what's about to happen. I turned to Angela, and she looked at me sadly, then stepped toward me and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I know how much it hurts. I can't believe she would do it again, she cried. I threw my head back and stared at my daughter. Again? Angie nodded, lowering her eyes. Tell me, please, I said quietly. It was 4 years ago. My period had just started, and I was having trouble getting my period. One morning when I was in class, I started having severe cramps. I went to the nurse's office and she sent me home with a note from my mom telling me what to get. When I walked into the house, she and Mr. Morissette were sitting on the couch. I must have screamed and ran upstairs to my room. I heard them talking and moving around, and then the door slammed shut. A few minutes later, my mom came into my room. At this point, Angie broke down and the tears began to pour in earnest. What happened next? I had to be patient. I had to let Angie tell me in her own way. Mom said if I told you or anyone else, you'd get divorced and I'd never see you again. She said the courts always give custody to mothers, and you'll be so mad at her that you'll probably move out, and I won't see you at all. She looked up at me and shook her head. I was scared, Dad. I believed her. I couldn't lose you. Not then, not ever again. I guess I promised Mom I wouldn't tell anyone. Except Ben, I never told until now. I put my arms around her again and pulled her to me. That conniving bitch had used Angie's love for me against her and blackmailed her into silence. So Gilson wasn't the first, and he wasn't the only one. I began to wonder how many there could have been. How could I have been so stupid? How had she managed to pull all this off without me suspecting a thing? Had I been so stupid that I hadn't noticed what was happening? Or, was she smarter than I gave her credit for? Angie, I don't know what to tell you except that I love you. I will do everything in my power to be a good father, no matter what happens in the future. You're old enough to make your own decisions, and I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I will support you, and it won't change my love for you. I didn't think I could say anything else. Thank you, Dad. I know that, and I know I want to be here with you. You need someone, and I think you're stuck with me. She smiled through her tears. We hugged again. I think I'd better go upstairs and talk to Ben. I'm sure it will be very hard for him to get over it. You said you told him about Mr. Morissette? Yeah, about a month after it happened. Ben said she was acting weird, and he noticed that Mom and I were kind of avoiding each other. I told him what I saw. How did he react? I asked. That's funny. Like it wasn't a big surprise, or maybe he suspected something, Angie replied thoughtfully. I was sure he'd think I was lying, but he didn't say anything at all. He just mouthed off and kept it to himself. I nodded and stood up, heading for the stairs in Ben's room. I knocked softly, then turned the knob and gently pushed the door open. Ben was sitting on the bed, staring out the window with empty eyes. It took a few seconds for him to acknowledge me, but he still didn't say anything. I'm sorry, Ben. You know I wouldn't hurt you if I could help it. I hope you understand I couldn't leave things the way they were, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to me. I'm sorry too, Dad. Mom really hurt a lot of people, didn't she? He said in a barely audible whisper. Yes, yeah. I don't know what will come of all this, but I'm sure your grandparents will be very upset with her, I replied. Why, Dad? Why? I have no idea, Ben. She's never once hinted to me that she's unhappy or dissatisfied with her life. Not a single hint, I repeated. I hate her, he suddenly muttered. No, don't do this, Ben. She loves you, you can be sure of that. It's something else, something I don't understand. Maybe she doesn't either. But don't let your anger consume you. I know you love her. Perhaps in time you can forgive her. I know she would never want to hurt you or Angie. Never, I said in as positive a tone as possible. He turned to me again with a devastated look. I put my hand on his shoulder to reassure him. After a few minutes, I got up and left his room, closing the door behind me. After I woke up Sunday morning, all hell broke loose. Sheila tried to call home, but I got Angie and Ben, and we headed out for breakfast. We may not have had much of an appetite, but we needed to get out of the house. I also turned off my phone and asked Angie to do the same with hers. I didn't want Sheila pissing her off over nothing. I told the kids what I had done by calling early in the morning, and Angie laughed. Ben smiled, and I realized they approved. Why didn't I feel better then? After breakfast, we drove to the park by the river, and the three of us went for a walk. I think in some strange way we all felt better. Perhaps because all the tension and anticipation of what was to come had subsided. Angie and Ben knew what was going to happen next, and they knew when it was going to happen. I myself had a knot in my stomach that would not dissolve. I was beginning the process that would end with the dissolution of my marriage and the breakup of my family. I still had to talk to my parents, but that was one of the two important things to do today. Of course, I would also call Lydia and tell her what I had done. I dreaded talking to George and Amy Pratt, Sheila's parents. We were close, and they adored their grandchildren. I wasn't sure how they would take the news or which side they would take. I decided to leave it at that until Sheila could decide for herself. She needed a place to live, and I suspected she would run home. I called Lydia Pankratz first. I told her about my little stunt, and she too laughed at my recklessness. Now that's something I'd never want to get, she grinned. I hope you enjoyed yourself, Mick. Not really. Cheap revenge, I guess. But now she knows, and she knows some of the consequences, I said, noticing the note of anger in my voice. How about the kids, Mick? I spoke to them last night, and I think things are stable. They're not very happy, as you can imagine, but they understand everything, and I think we'll have to wait and see what the long-term effects are for them, I said. But I have another surprise. What? Lydia was confused for a moment. Angie told me that about 4 years ago she caught her mother with another man. Sheila threatened Angie. She told her that I would divorce her, she would get custody, and they would never see me again. She blackmailed her into keeping quiet, I concluded. My God, could she have done that? Asked Lydia in amazement. I thought I knew her. I was wrong. I don't know her at all. She's just a disgusting woman, I said more with regret than anger. Lydia must have been wondering what to do next. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. Stay close to Angie and Ben, Mick. They need you to be there for them. It's going to be hell for them for a while. Be there for them, she concluded. Thanks again for your help, Lydia. As soon as I know where Sheila ends up, I'll let you know, and you can serve her. We signed, and I slammed my cell phone shut. It would be much harder to reach my parents. The conversation with my parents was mercifully short. I described the situation, and their first reaction was concern for Angie and Ben. I recounted my conversations with them last night and how they seemed to be fine today. This seemed to reassure my mom, and both said they would talk to us later when things had settled down. I wondered when that would happen myself. I turned the phone off again. It beeped, saying it was waiting for a call, and I was pretty sure it was Sheila. She wasn't on my list to talk to today. Angie, Ben, and I sat down on a picnic bench in the park, and I explained that I didn't want to be near our house for the next few hours. I expected their mother to rush home to try to get in. Finding that her key was useless, she would surely make a ruckus. I suggested we go out of town and stay there until a late dinner and then come back. They agreed, and we talked about where we could go. There was an open-air fair in a small town a few miles south, and we decided to see what it was all about. The fair was very interesting and fun. We ate a few hot dogs to get us through dinner and overall enjoyed an old-fashioned country fair. It took our minds off our problems and allowed us to think about something else. We didn't get back into town until almost 7 and stopped at a nice restaurant for dinner. We knew that sooner or later we would have to face changes in our lives, but on this last day we could get away from it all and find some peace and quiet. When we got home, it was almost 9 o'clock. Sheila was nowhere to be seen, and the house was dark. I parked the car in the garage and we went inside, turning on the lights as we went. Nothing had changed in the house since we'd left for breakfast that morning. The children went to their room and got ready for bed. I turned on the TV, but there was nothing interesting on, so I went to bed too. It was a restless night for me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew that my phone call and serving the divorce papers would have consequences. It was only a matter of time. I reconnected the phones when I got up Monday morning. I didn't expect to hear from Sheila so early. I was wrong. Almost immediately, the phone rang. We didn't have caller ID, so I had no idea who would be calling this early. I decided to tempt fate. Hello? It was a cautious greeting on my part. Mick? Mick, please, we need to talk. I was Sheila, of course. What is there to talk about? I asked in a low voice, trying not to disturb the children. Oh my God, Mick. I'll tell you what. I can explain. It's not what you think, she moaned. That's the second time you've said that. What do you think I think? I challenged. It wasn't like a novel. It was just a stupid mistake. Don't ruin our marriage over a stupid mistake, she pleaded. You must think I'm the stupidest person on the planet, Sheila. I know for a fact that you've been having fun with asshole Gilson for a year, no less. And now I know that Francis Morissette is one of your buddies. We got pictures and all the proof we need. It won't be pretty, Sheila, and you have no one to blame but yourself. I promise you it will be ugly. With those words, I hung up and disconnected the phone again. I came to work and informed Larry Coleman that I was divorcing my wife, and if she called, I would ask him not to transfer the call. He agreed and immediately went to Gloria's switchboard to inform her of our request. I went back to my office and tried to burrow into the papers on my desk. Everything was going well until about 11 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang. It was George Pratt, my father-in-law. Good morning, George. I can guess why you're calling. I apologize for not warning you and Amy in advance, I said preemptively. I think I understand, but I'd like to hear it from you, Mick. You've always been straight with me, so tell me what the hell happened, he asked reproachfully. I recounted my warnings to Sheila about Gilson, what I had learned about her affair with him, and her other connection with Morissette. When I finished with a condensed version of her activities, there was a long silence on the line. My God, he finally said slowly and softly. I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. Are you absolutely sure about that, Mick? He asked, hoping there was a glimmer of relief in his words. I'm very sorry, George. I'm afraid I'm not only sure, but I have photographic evidence, I said, feeling sorry for this fine man. He deserved better from his daughter. She's staying here for now, Mick. Do you plan to start divorce proceedings? Yes. All the paperwork is ready. She'll be delivered either to work or... Well, I'm sorry, but it can happen at your house, I apologized. I understand. I don't mind telling you that this will hurt not only her, but her mother as well. I know it's not your fault, but, well, it doesn't matter. I hope we'll still enjoy visiting the grandchildren, Mick, he finished hopefully. Of course it is. This isn't about you or Amy, George. I would never do that to you or the kids. You're always welcome here, I said sincerely. Thanks, Mick. I'm sorry, but thanks, he said sadly and hung up. When I put the phone back on the stand, I was emotionally drained. I expected there would be more moments like this in the weeks and months to come. I had to prepare for them. I learned that Sheila had gone to work that morning and, amazingly enough, had not yet lost her job. Gilson had no idea that all of this would come crashing down on his head at some point, and apparently decided to let things run their course. When Lydia confirmed that my wife was on time for work, she sent a bailiff over to her, and no sooner had she had her morning coffee than the divorce papers were in her hands. According to observers, she immediately broke down and ran out of the building. I believe she ran to her parents' house. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Shortly thereafter, Terry Gilson and Knox Gilson were served with court orders stating my intention to sue for damages based on alienation of affection and willful disregard for corporate responsibility, namely failure to comply with the morals clause in specific employee contracts. The claims included punitive and compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million. Let the circus begin. Reconstructing this story much later, I learned that Knox Gilson had a showdown with his son Terry and practically cut him off. No more easy jobs, no more rescue from situations with angry husbands, and if he didn't pull himself together, no more inheritance. Knox had indulged his son for the past 20-plus years and was finally at the end of his tether. Sooner or later, this sprouting teenager had to get back on his feet. Terry did the completely predictable thing. He went out and got drunk. Since he had been kicked out of the dealership, he had nowhere to go but to his townhouse. He disappeared into this cave for days. I knew the wheels of justice would turn slowly. Foolishly, Sheila had decided to contest the divorce until Lydia provided her lawyer with the evidence we had, including photographs. That was enough to beat the hell out of her. Lydia would do her best to limit the amount of my financial punishment, but worst case scenario, she would get half of everything. A reward for her perfidy. The week passed agonizingly slowly. I went to work, but I couldn't pretend to be efficient. Larry was very understanding and patient, but I knew this couldn't go on forever. I needed to think about my future as a single man and a single parent. It was a frightening prospect. On Saturday, I was mowing the lawn in my backyard when I heard a commotion in the driveway. A car door slammed, and a few seconds later I heard someone pounding on my front door. Neither Angie nor Ben was home, so I walked around the side of the house and ran head-on into Terry Gilson. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a farm tractor for several miles. He was a mess, but at one look at his face, I knew it wasn't good. That was the last thing I remembered before he hit me with his big right fist. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. I didn't really wake up, but I started to experience small bouts of unconsciousness. I was lying on my back and felt a numbing pain from my head to my groin. Apparently, it took me over 24 hours to finally regain consciousness. I was floating in and out of consciousness, barely catching bits and pieces of the here and now. At some point, I realized that someone was next to me. I felt a hand, but I couldn't open my eyes, or at least I didn't want to. They were like two marbles rolling around in the bottom of a tin can. I heard a strange voice, but although it was familiar, I couldn't connect it to my memories to see who it could have been. I tried to remember what could have brought me to this place, and after a while I remembered Gilson's face and then his fist. A day or so later, I found that my mom and Angie were at my bedside almost the entire time I was in the NICU. I tried to smile at them, but it hurt, and I hoped they realized how grateful I was to have them around. I think I heard Angie tell me Ben was coming over after school, and I tried to smile again. Just thinking about it hurt. It was over a week before I recovered enough to talk to my doctor. He started literally from the beginning. I had a concussion, the result of hitting the wooden frame of the garage door when Gilson hit me. I had a dislocated right shoulder and a badly bruised upper right arm. I had 3 and possibly 4 broken ribs. I had severe bruising of my kidneys and even more severe bruising of other internal organs. My testicles were badly swollen, and it was feared that I might lose one or both of them. Finally, I had my spleen removed when it was discovered that it had ruptured. My injuries were the result of a single punch from an enraged Terry Gilson, followed by systematic kicking as I lay unconscious on the ground. What saved me was that Felicia Romano, who had witnessed most of the altercation, screamed bloody murder from her kitchen window, causing Gilson to look up and realize he was being watched. He rushed to his car, backed out of our driveway, and rubber-tired the entire block. Felicia was smart enough to call 911, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. Gilson was identified by Felicia and another neighbor who recognized his license plate number when he sped down our street, nearly hitting a mother pushing a baby stroller. There aren't many white 1964 Ford Galaxy convertibles in our town, and a couple hours later, Gilson was seen leaving a bar and driving away in an inadequate manner. On top of all the woes, Gilson was arrested for DUI and resisting arrest. He just didn't know when to quit. When they threw him in a cell, they matched the assault complaint filed by Mrs. Felicia Romano and my admission to the hospital. After questioning Felicia, they charged Gilson with aggravated assault, assault with intent, and criminal trespassing. He was in deep shit, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When he called his father from prison, Knox Gilson didn't answer the phone. I wish I could have been there, but I was unconscious and lying on the operating table having my spleen removed. 2 days after I started having constant lucid moments, a plainclothes officer came to me and asked me to testify. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much. A face red with anger and a big fist. He asked what might have prompted the attack, and I told him about Terry's affair with my wife, the divorce, and the lawsuits. He nodded a couple times and thanked me before leaving. Epilogue. The divorce property division judgment was not too favorable to Sheila. I will be buying her share of our house. They gave her the absolute minimum and no alimony, as well as an emphatic lecture on her contribution to my injuries. Knox fired both Terry and Sheila. She was on the job hunt when our divorce became final. Her name was toxic in some circles, and I doubted if she would ever find a decent job in our town. Ben lives with Sheila, but I understand from Angie that their relationship is not what it used to be. I see Ben every week on weekends. We got a break from the judge. He seems to be getting stronger, but he's not the same kid I remember from better times. Angie is Angie. She's my girl and makes sure I'm on top of things. She manages the house, my diet, and exercise program. If I didn't know better, she could have been my mother. My folks have been a pillar of support and helped us when needed. They have no idea how important that was in the last few weeks. I just didn't need any more pressure. George and Amy, thank goodness, have remained friends. They are deeply disappointed in Sheila, but she is their only child, and they feel obliged to support her in her time of need. Having Ben around is a big plus for them. They are spoiling him in a way, but I don't mind. I just want Ben to get through this and come out of it in one piece. Angie stops by to visit. She and her mother talk to each other again, but I get the impression it's an awkward relationship at best. The lawsuits, of course, will never go to trial. Knox Gilson won't let that happen, according to my lawyer friends Dave and Lydia. We'll settle for a very large sum, and I'll be secured for years to come, even after taxes and legal fees. I already know I'll be able to take care of Angie and Ben's college tuition and provide them with a car. At least some good will come out of this whole mess. Physically, I have recovered as much as I can at all. I lost my spleen, but my kidneys, ribs, and shoulder are almost healed. I go to physical therapy 3 times a week and will continue to do so for a while longer. I still have pains that come and go daily. The doctor thinks my testicles are 80% functional, but I haven't had a chance to have them tested yet. I really don't have much enthusiasm for the opposite sex right now. When I have the money from the trial, I intend to buy Jimmy and Felicia something special. Jimmy has been there for me when I needed him, and Felicia may have saved my life. Nothing will be too extravagant for these two. What happens next, I ask myself regularly. I'm still reeling from what Sheila did to us, but I suppose in time I'll get over the worst of it. I quit Polar Industries, or at least tried to. Larry didn't want to hear about it and said he was giving me an indefinite leave of absence. Someday I'd have a lot of money, and I was trying to decide what I should do with it. I think I know. Frank Clay, one of my best customers and an old friend from when I first started in sales, wants to retire and sell his building materials business. It's a good business with a well-balanced trade between retail and construction customers. He is part of the Build Right buying group, and that helps him compete with the big stores. Dave Murney and I are going to meet with old Frank and see if we can make it happen. Ben was first in line to look for weekend and summer jobs when he found out about my plan. It doesn't make any difference. I want to keep him close and make sure he's okay while he gets through the next few years. Adolescence is hard enough as it is, and then there's the broken family. I look at Knox and Terry Gilson and realize that this is what happens when you are not involved or close enough in your children's lives. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened to me and our family. I'll be the first to admit that I took it personally and wanted revenge to the fullest. I still feel the same way. Perhaps if I had only had to deal with Gilson, things would have been different. I guess I can imagine how he might have swayed and charmed someone like Sheila. But when I learned about Morissette and how she blackmailed our daughter into silencing her, all thoughts of compassion vanished. Dave says Terry will spend 2 to 4 years in prison for assaulting me. We talked about a civil suit as well, but there will be no one to sue. His father disowned him. He has no job, no skills, and no prospects. When he gets out of prison, he will be in his early 50s and a bleak future awaits him. There is nothing more we can do to hurt him. Amazingly, Knox Gilson came to me while I was in rehab. He apologized for everything that had happened and for his deadbeat son. I accepted his apology as sincere. He was well aware that the emotional damage his son had done to me was accompanied by physical damage. We shook hands and I raised my opinion of Mr. Gilson Sr. a notch or two. And here you are. Sad story. I thought I had the perfect family. Hell, I was sure I had the perfect family. I can look back on the good times we had together, or with anger. Maybe someday I can do the former, because right now I'm still dealing with the latter. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.